Not every trip ends the way it begins. For the people in this video, one decision turned into something they couldn't escape. Hi, I'm Jaxon, and in today's episode I'm looking at when African safaris turn deadly. From a father and daughter who stepped into water they shouldn't have to a teacher whose encounter with a hippo ended in the worst way possible. It was June 21st, 2017, and the midday sun beat down mercilessly on a narrow channel of the Okavango Delta in Botswana. Just beyond a bend in the waterway, several massive shapes floated half-submerged, their ears twitching occasionally as they monitored the shoreline. Nathaniel Masando was a 38-year-old mechanical engineer from Johannesburg, South Africa, known among his friends for his dedication to his only daughter following a difficult divorce 2 years prior. His weekends were typically spent at Talia's soccer matches or planning their next adventure together. At 12 years old, Nathaniel said that Talia had inherited his curiosity and fearlessness, qualities that had served them well on previous camping trips. This trip to Botswana was meant to be special, a father-daughter bonding experience before Talia entered her teenage years. He said that he had read about hippos in guidebooks, but retained only cursory knowledge. They were herbivores, mostly active at night, and looked slow and docile during the day. Hippopotamuses kill more people in Africa than any other large animal, responsible for an estimated 500 deaths annually, a figure widely cited in wildlife studies. Despite their herbivorous diet and seemingly slow, lethargic appearance, hippos are fiercely territorial and possess one of the most powerful bites in the animal kingdom. Most critically, they perceive any intrusion into their aquatic territory as a direct threat and can attack swiftly and without warning, leaving little opportunity for escape. The morning began as planned, with their guide, a young local named Thibaut, navigating them through the channels by Mokoro. Mid-morning, Nathaniel asked to get closer to the hippos for photos. Thibaut refused, citing company safety rules, but Nathaniel offered extra cash, insisting the water looked shallow. Against his better judgment, and despite company policy and inexperience, Thibaut relented, letting them exit the canoe near the bank. 3 fishermen working nets about 50 feet downstream noticed the tourists wading into the channel. They immediately began shouting warnings in Setswana and broken English, gesturing frantically for them to return to shore. One fisherman later told authorities that the hippos had been unusually aggressive all morning, charging at his empty boat twice already. Nathaniel waved back, misinterpreting their alarm as a friendly greeting. The water reached just above Talia's knees as she moved forward. Talia took 3 more steps before her foot slipped on the muddy bottom. She stumbled forward with a small cry, her arms windmilling as she fought for balance. The splash was minimal, barely louder than the gentle lapping of water against the reeds. But it was enough. A large male hippo, previously submerged with only its ears and eyes visible, erupted from the water about 15 feet away. The fishermen's shouting intensified to screams. Nathaniel spun toward the sound and saw the massive animal charging directly at his daughter, its mouth opening to reveal enormous tusks. The hippo moved with shocking speed, its bulk creating a wake that knocked Talia completely off her feet before it even reached her. The impact was devastating. The hippo's head struck her torso with the mass of a multi-ton animal, the blunt force of which instantly pinned her to the muddy bottom. Nathaniel lunged toward them, shouting his daughter's name, but the hippo's rear end swung around violently, catching Nathaniel across the ribs, sending him sprawling backward into deeper water. When Nathaniel surfaced, gasping and disoriented, he saw the hippo raise its head slightly. Talia's small body remained beneath it, her bright orange life vest visible through the churned, muddy water. The animal shifted its weight, and even from several feet away, the hippo's jaws closed around Talia's shoulder and chest, crushing with incomprehensible pressure. Their guide was screaming into a radio. Nathaniel staggered forward again, heedless of danger, and grabbed Talia's arm. He pulled with desperate strength, but the hippo's weight held her fast. Another shift of the animal's massive head, and Talia's body went completely limp. Blood began spreading through the water in dark ribbons. The noise, combined with the fishermen's continued screaming, finally caused the hippo to release its grip and back away, snorting aggressively. Nathaniel hauled Talia's body against his chest and stumbled toward shore. The fishermen had radioed the main ranger station the moment the attack began. Rangers arrived by motorboat from a nearby station in under 10 minutes, their sirens and engine noise driving the remaining hippos to the far side of the channel. Medical personnel accompanying the rangers pronounced Talia dead at the scene. The primary cause of death was determined to be traumatic asphyxiation, combined with crush injuries incompatible with life. Nathaniel suffered 3 cracked ribs and extensive bruising from the tail strike, but refused treatment until after Talia's body had been transported. 2 days later, he flew back to Johannesburg after formalities with local authorities had arranged repatriation. The tour company faced criminal charges for allowing clients to enter the water against established safety protocols, and Thibault was fired. It was March 7th, 2015, and the vast wilderness of Kruger National Park shimmered under the intense heat of the South African summer. Benjamin Okafor, known to his friends as Ben, crouched behind a cluster of mopin trees as he adjusted the settings on his professional camera equipment. The 42-year-old freelance photographer from Lagos had been tracking a legendary bull elephant known to local guides as Tusker for over 3 hours, waiting for the perfect opportunity to capture the magnificent animal in ideal lighting conditions. Ben had been working in South Africa for 6 months, building an impressive portfolio of wildlife photographs that he hoped would land him a coveted contract with National Geographic. His dedication to his craft was legendary among his peers. He would spend entire days in the bush, often ignoring basic safety protocols in his relentless pursuit of unique and dramatic images that would set his work apart from other wildlife photographers. The bull elephant he was tracking was truly spectacular, standing nearly 12 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing an estimated 6 tons. Tusker's ivory tusks were particularly impressive, each measuring over 6 feet in length and representing exactly the kind of majestic subject that could make Ben's career. The elephant had been feeding peacefully in a grove of marula trees, seemingly unaware of the photographer's presence. African elephants are the largest land mammals on Earth, with adult bulls capable of weighing up to 7 tons and standing 13 feet tall at the shoulder. They possess incredible intelligence and complex social structures, but can become extremely dangerous when threatened or during must, a period of heightened testosterone that makes males particularly aggressive. Bull elephants in must are unpredictable and will charge at perceived threats with devastating force, using their massive size and sharp tusks as weapons capable of killing lions, rhinos, or humans. Ben had noticed the telltale signs that Tusker was in must. The temporal glands on either side of his head were secreting a dark, oily substance, and his behavior showed the restlessness and aggression typical of males in this dangerous condition. However, Ben's excitement about the photographic opportunity overrode his caution, and he decided to approach closer for the intimate shots that would make his portfolio truly exceptional. Against every safety protocol he had learned during his months in the African bush, Ben left the safety of his safari vehicle and began approaching Tusker on foot. He moved carefully through the sparse vegetation, using trees and termite mounds as cover, while he closed the distance between himself and the massive elephant. Tusker detected Ben's scent long before the photographer realized he had been discovered. The elephant's trunk rose into the air, testing the wind currents and confirming the presence of a human intruder in his territory. The massive bull's ears began flapping in agitation, and his trunk curled and uncurled in the distinctive threat display that experienced guides recognized as a warning of imminent attack. Ben was completely focused on his camera settings when Tusker made his decision to eliminate the perceived threat. The 6-ton elephant charged without warning, his massive frame moving with surprising speed as he covered the distance between them in powerful, ground-shaking strides. The sound of Tusker's charge was like thunder rolling across the landscape, his massive feet pounding the earth while his trunk trumpeted a deafening warning call that echoed for miles across the savanna. Ben looked up from his camera viewfinder to see 6 tons of enraged elephant bearing down on him with unstoppable momentum. Ben dropped his camera equipment and turned to run toward his distant vehicle, but his human speed was no match for the charging elephant's powerful legs. After covering only 20 yards, Ben tripped over a fallen log and crashed to the ground, his expensive camera gear scattering across the dusty earth. Tusker reached Ben's position within seconds, his massive front feet coming down on the photographer's torso with bone-crushing force. The impact drove Ben's body into the hard-packed earth, while his ribs collapsed under the elephant's enormous weight. Ben's desperate screams were cut short as Tusker's 6-ton mass compressed his chest cavity and ruptured his internal organs. The enraged bull elephant used his massive tusks to gore Ben's already lifeless body, lifting and tossing the photographer's remains with the same ease that he might move a fallen branch. The elephant's fury continued for several more minutes as he trampled and gored Ben's body repeatedly, ensuring that the perceived threat was completely eliminated. Other tourists in nearby vehicles witnessed the horrific attack, but could only watch helplessly from a safe distance. Park rangers arrived 20 minutes after receiving radio calls about the attack, but Ben was already dead, his body barely recognizable after Tusker's prolonged assault. Remarkably, Ben's camera was found still clutched in his hand, and the final photograph on the memory card showed Tusker's charge, a haunting image that captured the last thing Ben saw before his death. Wildlife officials made the decision not to relocate or destroy Tusker, as the attack had occurred in a restricted area where Ben should not have been on foot. Ben's death devastated his family in Nigeria and sent shockwaves through the wildlife photography community. His portfolio, completed posthumously, was eventually published as a tribute to his dedication and talent, though the circumstances of his death served as a sobering reminder of the risks inherent in wildlife photography. It was June 22, 2016, and the Chobe River in Botswana flowed lazily through one of Africa's most spectacular wildlife corridors. The riverbanks were crowded with elephants, buffalo, and countless other species drawn to the permanent water source during the dry season. Melissa and Trevor Ashford had been married for exactly 9 days, having chosen an African safari as their honeymoon destination. Both 29 years old, the couple had met 3 years earlier while working at the same advertising agency in London. Trevor was a graphic designer with an adventurous spirit, while Melissa worked in account management. They had booked a guided canoe safari along the Chobe River, an increasingly popular activity that allowed tourists to experience wildlife from water level. Their guide, Kabo Moati, was a veteran river guide with 12 years of experience navigating the Chobe's waters and the dangerous animals that inhabited them. During the morning safety briefing, Kabo had been explicit about the rules: remain seated at all times, keep voices low, never put hands in the water, maintain distance from hippos and crocodiles, and most importantly, follow all instructions immediately without question. Nile crocodiles are among Africa's most dangerous predators, capable of taking prey as large as wildebeest and occasionally humans. Adult males can reach lengths of over 16 feet and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. These reptiles are ambush predators with incredible patience, often remaining motionless for hours before exploding into action. Their bite force exceeds 3,000 pounds per square inch, the strongest of any living animal. Crocodiles are particularly dangerous near riverbanks where they bask in the sun, and they can launch themselves from the water with shocking speed when prey comes within range. The morning had been spectacular. The couple had paddled past elephants drinking at the water's edge, watched hippos yawning in the shallows, and photographed countless birds. By early afternoon, Trevor had become increasingly bold, leaning over the canoe's edge for better camera angles, despite Kabo's repeated warnings to stay centered. They rounded a bend in the river, and Kabo immediately began back paddling, instructing the couple to remain absolutely still. On the muddy bank ahead, a massive Nile crocodile basked in the afternoon sun. The reptile was enormous, easily 14 feet long, with scarred armor plating that indicated an old and successful predator. Kabo began steering the canoe to give the crocodile a wide berth, explaining in a low voice that they needed to maintain maintain at least 20 meters distance. Trevor wanted a close-up photograph of the crocodile, the kind of dramatic image that would dominate his social media feed. He argued with Cabo, insisting that the crocodile was clearly asleep and posed no danger. When Cabo refused to paddle closer, Trevor made a decision that would prove fatal. Despite Cabo's sharp warning to remain seated, Trevor stood up in the canoe to get a better angle for his photograph. The moment Trevor rose to his feet, the canoe's stability shifted dramatically. Melissa instinctively grabbed for Trevor's arm to pull him back down, but her sudden movement combined with Trevor's standing position created a catastrophic imbalance. The canoe rocked violently to one side. Trevor lost his balance and fell sideways, his weight pulling the canoe over. Melissa tumbled out the opposite side as the canoe capsized, dumping both of them into the chest-deep water, approximately 12 meters from the basking crocodile. Cabo managed to stay with the overturning canoe and immediately began shouting for the couple to swim toward him. He grabbed the capsized canoe and tried to right it, while radioing emergency coordinates with his waterproof radio. The moment Trevor and Melissa hit the water, the crocodile's eyes snapped open. The massive reptile launched itself from the bank with explosive speed, its powerful tail propelling its enormous body through the water in seconds. Trevor was closest to the crocodile and thrashing in panic, creating vibrations and splashing that attracted the predator's attention. The reptile's jaws clamped onto Trevor's torso, the 3,000-pound bite force crushing his ribcage instantly. Trevor's scream was cut short as the crocodile began its death roll, a hunting technique where the reptile spins rapidly to disorient prey and drown it. Trevor's body spun violently in the churning water, disappearing beneath the surface within seconds. Melissa had surfaced several meters away and was swimming desperately toward Cabo, her strokes frantic but hampered by her life jacket and the current. Cabo had managed to partially right the canoe and extended his paddle toward her, shouting for her to grab it. Melissa's fingers were inches from the paddle when she suddenly jerked backward and screamed. The same crocodile, having released Trevor's lifeless body, had turned its attention to the continued splashing and movement. The reptile surged through the water and clamped its jaws around Melissa's lower body. Cabo grabbed Melissa's outstretched hand and tried to pull her toward the canoe, but the crocodile's grip was absolute. The reptile began pulling backward, its immense strength easily overpowering Cabo's desperate efforts. Melissa's grip on Cabo's hand slipped as the crocodile dragged her away from the canoe. The reptile executed another death roll, and Melissa's body disappeared beneath the blood-stained water. Cabo continued shouting and paddling toward where Melissa had gone under, but neither she nor Trevor resurfaced. The entire sequence from capsize to the final attack had lasted approximately 90 seconds. A motorized patrol boat from the Chobe National Park headquarters arrived within 8 minutes of Cabo's first emergency call. The rangers found Cabo clinging to his partially capsized canoe, still scanning the water for any sign of the couple. The rangers pulled Cabo into their boat and immediately began a search pattern, using poles to probe the murky water while maintaining vigilant watch for crocodiles. They spotted Trevor's body floating face down approximately 30 meters from the attack site within 15 minutes. Trevor had sustained massive trauma to his torso and had clearly died within moments of the initial attack. Melissa's body was not immediately visible, and the increasing number of crocodiles in the area made continued searching extremely dangerous. After 2 hours of intensive searching, with no sign of Melissa, and with darkness approaching, authorities made the difficult decision to suspend the search until first light. The following morning, a larger search team located Melissa's body in the reeds along the opposite bank, approximately 100 meters from where she had been taken. The investigation determined that Trevor's decision to stand up in the canoe had directly caused the capsize, and that both deaths resulted entirely from tourist error rather than guide negligence. Cabo was cleared of any wrongdoing, though he was deeply traumatized by witnessing the attacks and his inability to save either tourist. The deaths of Melissa and Trevor Ashford devastated their families and sent shockwaves through the safari tourism industry. Chobe River operators implemented additional safety measures, including stricter enforcement of the no-standing rule. The incident served as a grim reminder that Africa's waterways are among the continent's most dangerous environments. It was May 19th, 2015, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the golden grasslands of Chobe National Park. The air hung thick and still, as Cabello Maruti steered his open-sided Land Cruiser toward a cluster of acacia trees where a small herd of Cape buffalo grazed. Cabello was a 34-year-old safari guide from Jaxon, a border town where tourism jobs were coveted and competition fierce. He'd worked for a private company for 3 years, long enough to develop a reputation among the local guiding community as someone who pushed boundaries. His approach to wildlife viewing prioritized client satisfaction over protocol, getting closer than regulations allowed, staying longer than was safe, and frequently dismissing the cautious advice of more experienced guides. That afternoon's group consisted of 6 American tourists on a 4-day photography package. They'd already seen elephants, giraffes, and a distant pride of lions, but several had expressed disappointment at not getting close enough for dramatic shots. Cabello had promised them something special before the day ended, and when he spotted the buffalo herd less than 100 feet from the vehicle track, he saw his opportunity to deliver. Cape buffalo are among Africa's deadliest animals, killing more hunters and guides than any other large mammal. Bulls can weigh 2,000 pounds, stand over 5 feet tall, and have curved horns spanning over 3 feet, fused at the base into a solid shield with sharp points. Unpredictable and quick to retaliate, they have poor eyesight but excellent hearing and can charge up to 30 miles per hour with surprising agility. As Cabello maneuvered the Land Cruiser to within 60 feet of the herd, the tourists began photographing eagerly. Several buffalo raised their heads, staring directly at the vehicle. One particularly large bull separated slightly from the group, positioning himself between the herd and the vehicle. His head lowered incrementally, and his tail began flicking in short, agitated movements. These were textbook warning signs that experienced guides recognized as preludes to charging behavior. But Cabello continued narrating about buffalo's social structure as if nothing was amiss. After approximately 10 minutes of viewing, Cabello announced he needed to relieve himself. He turned off the engine, a clear violation of basic safari protocol, and stepped down from the driver's side, walking around to the rear of the vehicle. The tourists continued filming through the open sides of the Land Cruiser, their cameras fixed on the herd, inadvertently documenting what would happen next. The bull buffalo remained stationary, approximately 50 feet away, head still lowered and tail flicking with increasing frequency. Cabello moved to a spot just behind the rear tire, partially visible to the tourists and fully exposed to the herd. The attack began without additional warning. The bull buffalo exploded into motion, closing the distance in about 3 seconds. Cabello turned at the sound of hoofbeats, his body language shifting from casual to panicked in the final instant before impact. The buffalo's right horn caught him just below the rib cage, the force of the 2,000-pound animal at full charge driving the horn through his abdomen and out near his lower back. His feet left the ground as the animal's forward momentum carried him upward, a grotesque display of raw power. The buffalo shook its head violently, flinging Cabello sideways where he landed heavily on the hard-packed earth, roughly 8 feet away. He tried to rise, one hand clutching at the massive wound in his abdomen, but the buffalo was already circling back. Tourists watched in horror as the animal's front hooves came down on Cabello's chest and shoulder with sickening force. The buffalo stomped repeatedly, each blow crushing bone and driving Cabello's body deeper into the dust. The tourists' screams filled the audio track, their voices raw with horror as they pounded frantically on the metal window frames. Several shouted for someone to start the vehicle, but none knew how to start or drive the Land Cruiser. The sustained attack lasted roughly 40 seconds before the buffalo finally stepped back, regarding Cabello's motionless form briefly before trotting back to rejoin the herd, which had barely moved throughout the incident. One of the tourists, a man from Colorado with emergency medical training, managed to radio another guide on the backup communication device Cabello had left in the front seat. Park medics arrived 14 minutes later in a rapid response vehicle, but Cabello had already died from massive internal hemorrhaging. The preliminary field examination noted multiple fractured ribs, a punctured liver, collapsed lungs, and severe crush injuries to the chest cavity. The locally operating safari company settled privately with Caballot's family, providing an undisclosed sum to his wife and 2 young daughters. The company implemented mandatory engine-on policies and doubled the minimum distance requirements for buffalo viewing. The footage, taken as evidence by park authorities, was later leaked online before being repeatedly removed. It was August 14, 2016. The sun rose over Ruaha National Park's dry savanna, casting long shadows through the acacia trees as dust hung motionless in the air. At the edge of a small tourist camp, where the scent of cooking fires mixed with the earthy smell of drought-hardened soil, Elias Corvin would make a life-changing decision. Elias, 29, from Dar es Salaam, had a complicated past. In his early 20s, he spent 3 years poaching in southern Tanzania before a close call with park rangers made him quit. Since then, he became fascinated with observing the animals he once hunted, keeping a handwritten diary of encounters. Local guides had mixed opinions. Some admired his change, others distrusted his reckless behavior. He traveled often to national parks, frequently pushing boundaries respected by experienced trackers. He had arrived at Ruaha 3 days earlier with Jonas Mbeki, a 31-year-old guide in training who had known Elias for 2 years. Jonas often accompanied him on these excursions, partly out of friendship and partly out of concern for Elias's tendency to ignore safety protocols. That morning, Elias had mentioned wanting to track leopards near the camp's perimeter, an area guides had specifically warned visitors to avoid during early hours, when predators were most active. African leopards are solitary ambush hunters. Unlike lions that hunt in coordinated groups or cheetahs that rely on speed, leopards are stealth killers that strike from elevated positions or dense cover. Their bite is a very powerful bite, capable of puncturing the neck and crushing vertebrae, concentrated through inch-long canines designed to puncture the throat or spine of prey. They can drag kills twice their body weight into trees and are known for their ability to remain motionless for hours before attacking with explosive speed, accelerating to 35 miles per hour in seconds. At 6:30 a.m., Elias left the main camp without informing the head guide, slipping past the marked boundary rope that designated safe areas. Jonas followed approximately 20 feet behind, carrying only a walking stick and his concerns. Camp staff noticed Elias's absence during the morning head count, but they knew him personally and assumed he was just briefly exploring the immediate vicinity. The 2 men moved through increasingly thick vegetation, pushing aside low branches and stepping over exposed roots. Jonas said that Elias was searching the ground for tracks, his attention focused downward rather than scanning the environment around him. Rangers had specifically briefed all camp visitors the previous evening about increased leopard activity near the northern fig grove, exactly where Elias was now heading. As they approached a massive fig tree roughly 200 feet beyond the camp boundary, Jonas noticed movement in the canopy above. He called out a warning, Elias's name followed by an urgent alert, but Elias was bent low, examining what appeared to be fresh scrape marks on the tree trunk. He straightened and tilted his head upward, squinting into the leaves just as the leopard shifted position on a thick branch 12 feet above. The attack happened almost without sound or warning. The leopard dropped from the branch in a controlled fall, landing squarely on Elias's shoulders with all 4 paws extended. The impact drove Elias forward onto his knees. His cry of shock cut short as the animal's weight, roughly 140 pounds, forced the air from his lungs. Curved claws, each over an inch long, punctured through his shirt and into the flesh of his upper back and shoulders, anchoring the predator to him. Jonas ran forward immediately, shouting and swinging his walking stick at the leopard's hindquarters. The animal twisted with terrifying speed, its jaws already clamped around the back of Elias's neck. Elias tried to reach behind himself, his hands grasping uselessly at spotted fur as the leopard's canines sank deeper into the vulnerable space between his skull and spine. Blood darkened his collar within seconds. Jonas later estimated the struggle lasted about a minute, though subjective time under extreme stress is unreliable. Elias's attempts to stand failed, as the leopard's weight and positioning kept him pinned forward. His movements became erratic, then weakened rapidly as the bite compressed critical structures in his neck. The leopard bit Elias's throat from the side. Jonas, seeing severe bleeding, backed away and ran toward camp, shouting for help. The leopard dragged Elias several feet to the fig tree before retreating. Rangers arrived minutes later in an SUV, finding Elias face down beneath the tree amid disturbed soil and blood. Jonas sat 30 feet away, visibly shaking, still gripping his walking stick. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as massive hemorrhage and spinal cord damage resulting from multiple bite wounds to the neck and throat. Elias's body was transported from the park later that afternoon under ranger escort. His family in Dar es Salaam received notification by evening. Jonas refused to return to guide training for nearly 8 months. He eventually resumed his education, but avoided assignments in Ruaha. It was October 3rd, 2014, and the rolling hills of Hluhluwe Imfolozi Park in South Africa basked under the warm spring sunshine. Emma Johansson, a 24-year-old veterinary student from Sweden, approached the holding pen, where a female white rhinoceros stood with her week-old calf. Emma had been volunteering with the park's rhino conservation project for 4 months, and her gentle nature with the animals had made her a favorite among both the staff and the rhinos in their care. Emma had raised money through crowdfunding to cover her expenses for the 6-month volunteer program, driven by her passion for wildlife protection and her desire to gain hands-on experience with endangered species. Her work with orphaned rhino calves had been particularly successful, and she had developed a reputation for her ability to calm even the most agitated animals. The female rhino, known to the staff as Nomsa, had given birth to her calf in the semi-wild section of the park, where animals lived in large enclosures that simulated natural conditions. Emma had been assigned to conduct a routine health check on both mother and calf, a procedure she had performed dozens of times during her volunteer stint. White rhinoceros are the second largest land mammals after elephants, with adult females weighing up to 4,000 pounds and standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Despite their name, they are actually gray in color, and their massive size is matched by their surprising speed and agility. Female rhinos are normally docile animals, but they become extremely protective when caring for young calves, and will aggressively defend their offspring against any perceived threat. Their single horn can grow up to 5 feet in length and is capable of inflicting devastating wounds when used as a weapon. Emma had grown comfortable working with the rhinos over her months at the park, and she had developed what she believed was a special bond with several of the animals in the conservation program. As Emma approached Nomsa's enclosure, she noticed what appeared to be a small cut on the rhino's rear leg that needed examination. Emma entered the enclosure with her medical kit, planning to examine the wound and clean it if needed. Nomsa watched Emma's approach with apparent calm, showing none of the agitation that typically preceded aggressive behavior in rhinos. The massive female continued grazing while keeping one eye on her calf, who was nursing peacefully nearby. What Emma failed to recognize was that Nomsa's calm demeanor was actually the behavior of a protective mother assessing a potential threat to her offspring. The rhino was allowing Emma to approach while simultaneously preparing to defend her calf if the human's intentions proved hostile. Emma knelt down beside Nomsa's rear leg to get a better look at the suspected wound, bringing herself within striking distance of the massive animal's powerful legs and horn. She was completely focused on her examination when Nomsa made her decision to eliminate what she perceived as a threat to her calf. The 4,000-pound rhino spun around with surprising speed and agility, her massive horn aimed directly at Emma's torso. Emma looked up from her examination just in time to see 2 tons of muscle and bone bearing down on her with unstoppable momentum. Nomsa's horn struck Emma in the abdomen with devastating force, the sharp point puncturing through her body and lifting her off the ground like a rag doll. The rhino's incredible strength drove the horn deep into Emma's torso, causing massive internal damage to her organs and major blood vessels. Emma's scream of agony echoed across the conservation facility as Nomsa shook her massive head, the movement causing additional trauma to the horn wound. The rhino then dropped Emma to the ground and began trampling her with her massive feet, each impact crushing bones and causing further internal injuries. Other volunteers heard Emma's screams and came running to the enclosure, but they could only watch in horror as Namsa continued her assault on the young woman's broken body. Emma's movements ceased within minutes as massive blood loss and internal trauma overwhelmed her system. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 20 minutes and immediately airlifted Emma to a trauma center in Durban, but her injuries were too severe to survive. She died during surgery from massive internal bleeding caused by the rhino's horn and the subsequent trampling. The investigation revealed that Emma had violated safety protocols by entering the enclosure alone and approaching too closely to a mother with a young calf. Namsa and her offspring were relocated to a more remote section of the park, and volunteer procedures were revised to require trained ranger accompaniment during all animal interactions. Emma's death shocked the international conservation community and highlighted the inherent dangers of working with large wildlife, even in controlled environments. Her family established a scholarship fund in her memory to support other young people pursuing careers in wildlife conservation. It was October 3rd, 2018, and the African sun was beginning its descent over the A Safari Reserve, where Linda Peterson was about to discover that a camera lens offers no protection from 14,000 pounds of charging muscle. Linda Peterson was a 27-year-old semi-professional photographer from Seattle who had saved for 3 years to afford a luxury African safari. She arrived with expensive camera equipment and an inflated sense of her expertise. Linda had a documented pattern of dismissing professional advice, arguing with guides, and insisting she knew better than people with decades of experience. Her guide was Thabo Nkosi, a professional with 16 years of experience and a spotless safety record. Trouble began immediately. During the morning drive, Thabo spotted lions resting under acacia trees and stopped at the required 50-meter distance. Linda complained that the distance was too far for close-up shots and demanded he drive closer. When he explained park regulations, Linda accused him of being overly cautious and threatened to complain to his company. On October 3rd, during the afternoon drive, Thabo located a large bull elephant feeding near a waterhole. The terrain was uneven. A dry riverbed forced the vehicle to approach along a narrow track that left them closer than the standard 100-meter guideline, stopping at approximately 50 meters. This bull showed clear signs of must, temporal glands streaming fluid, aggressive posturing, and warning displays toward the vehicle. Thabo stopped and explained that the bull was in must and extremely dangerous, emphasizing that no one would exit the vehicle under any circumstances. Linda complained that even 50 meters was too far and accused Thabo of ruining her expensive safari. Must is a periodic condition in bull elephants, driven by a surge in testosterone that can reach levels 60 times higher than normal. During must, bulls become unpredictable and highly aggressive, not just toward perceived threats, but toward anything in their environment. A bull elephant in must weighs up to 14,000 pounds and can run 25 miles per hour. At 4:37 p.m., while Thabo was explaining elephant behavior to other guests, Linda stood up in the Land Rover and climbed over the side, dropping to the ground. Despite Thabo's immediate orders to return, Linda ignored him and walked toward the elephant, raising her camera. The bull's ears flared wide. He shook his head in a sharp, violent arc, throwing dust from his trunk, the last warning signal before a committed charge. He raised his trunk and trumpeted, body shifting into an aggressive stance, head high, tusks forward. Thabo shouted. Linda took another step forward, adjusting her camera settings. The first movement wasn't a full run. It was a violent forward lurch, the bull's entire weight shifting onto his front legs as he committed. Then he was at full speed. Linda turned and ran, but the distance was nothing to an animal moving at 25 miles per hour. The bull struck her at full force, launching her through the air. She landed hard on rocky terrain. Linda tried to move, her body not responding. The elephant, still agitated, moved over her. massive feet striking the ground around and against her before finally turning back toward the waterhole. By the time rangers reached her, she was unresponsive. The medical examiner determined Linda died from massive blunt force trauma, crushed internal organs, punctured lungs, and catastrophic internal bleeding. She likely lost consciousness within moments of the initial impact. It was September 3rd, 2016, the South African high-veld winter giving way to early spring warmth as midday sun beat down on Kruger National Park. In full view of multiple witnesses and a running dash cam, a multi-ton animal decides a human presence is a threat worth eliminating. Leanne de Kock was a 52-year-old primary school administrator from Bloemfontein, known among her colleagues for her methodical approach to managing student records and her tendency to defer to authority figures. She had never been on safari before. Her sister-in-law had organized the extended family trip, booking a guided day tour through one of the park's smaller operators. Leanne had expressed nervousness about the wildlife, but trusted the guide implicitly, believing his experience would keep them safe. That morning, she had asked several times whether it was safe to be so close to the animals, but when reassured by the guide, she nodded and said nothing further. African bush elephants are the largest land animals on Earth, with bulls weighing up to 13,000 pounds and standing over 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Their trunks are composed of thousands of dense muscle bundles, capable of lifting several hundred pounds while remaining precise enough to grasp small vegetation. Despite their size, elephants can charge at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Male elephants experience musth, a physiological state marked by temporal gland secretions running down the sides of the face, continuous urine dribbling, heightened restlessness, and sharply increased aggression. During these episodes, which can last months, bulls become unpredictable and hyper-aggressive, attacking anything perceived as a threat. The guide had stopped just outside a designated picnic area, despite posted warnings stating that exiting vehicles beyond marked zones was prohibited. A bull elephant was visible approximately 70 yards away, partially obscured by the trees. Several family members had pointed it out immediately. The animal was feeding, its ears loosely flapping against its body as it cooled itself in the heat. The guide assured everyone it was fine, that the elephant was far enough away and calm. A family in a nearby SUV had parked to observe from inside their vehicle, their dashcam running as they recorded the scenery. As Leanne's group unpacked sandwiches and coolers, spreading a blanket on the ground, the elephant slowly turned its massive head toward the vehicles. Its ears, which had been relaxed against its body, suddenly spread outward and remained rigid, a warning signal that precedes aggression in elephants. The dashcam footage, later provided to park authorities, captured the charge from start to impact, showing what happened next with devastating clarity. The elephant suddenly charged, its ears flared wide, trunk initially held tight against its chest. People heard the sound of its approach, a low rumbling bellow combined with the thunder of feet striking packed earth. They reacted chaotically. Several family members lunged for open vehicle doors, while others screamed and stumbled backward in panic. Leanne froze near the rear door of the tour van, approximately 8 feet from safety. Whether she was paralyzed by fear or simply unable to process the speed of the charge, she remained motionless for nearly 2 seconds, an eternity in the context of a charging elephant. The bull reached her in moments, its trunk snapping outward to shove and hook her around the torso just below the ribcage. The force lifted her completely off the ground, her legs dangling as she was raised roughly 5 feet in the air. The elephant slammed her against the side of the SUV with tremendous force. The sound of impact, a sharp metallic deformation followed by a dull, heavy thud. The vehicle's side panel visibly dented inward. The elephant yanked her back and drove her forward again using its head and shoulder, her body striking the vehicle a second time with even greater force. Her head snapped violently on impact. She fell to the ground when the animal disengaged, landing in a crumpled heap. The footage showed her attempting to rise, one arm pushing weakly against the dirt before the elephant surged forward again, ramming her prone body with its skull and upper tusk base, sending her sliding several feet across the clearing. The bull then stepped forward and pressed a massive front foot down onto her upper torso, pinning her briefly against the ground. After approximately 8 seconds, the elephant stepped back as the guide hesitated before finally revving the engine and shouting, the sudden noise drawing the animal's attention away. Leanne had stopped moving by then, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. A German tourist in the nearby SUV called emergency services. Park rangers arrived minutes later, but Leanne showed no signs of life when they reached her. The medical examiner's report listed massive internal trauma as the cause of death, including multiple fractured ribs, a ruptured spleen, severe head trauma, and a broken neck. The guide's permit was suspended indefinitely following investigation by authorities. Leanne's family declined all media interviews, but released a brief statement through their attorney requesting privacy. The dashcam footage was sealed under court order, was used as evidence during the investigation. It was September 3rd, 2018. The Namibian sun hung merciless over Etosha National Park, where dust devils traced patterns across the salt pan, and a solitary black rhinoceros grazed near an acacia cluster. Johan Murray was a 50-year-old retired botanist from Windhoek. He had spent 3 decades cataloging desert flora, publishing extensively in regional journals before retiring the previous year. His reputation was built on patience and careful observation, qualities that made his final error all the more unexpected. Johan had participated in dozens of safaris throughout his career, often combining wildlife viewing with botanical surveys. His family said that this particular trip was meant to be recreational, a solo expedition to photograph Etosha's landscape during the dry season when visibility was optimal. His vehicle that morning, a rented Land Cruiser carrying 3 European tourists and their driver, had stopped at a scenic overlook near Okaukwecho Camp. Johan had volunteered to guide the tourists, sharing botanical knowledge between animal sightings. He carried a professional camera with a wide-angle lens and tripod, though he'd expressed frustration earlier about not capturing the close-range shots he wanted. The safari driver, a 34-year-old local named Petrus Ngedengwa, had explicitly stated that morning that no one was to exit the vehicle under any circumstances. Park regulations were unambiguous on this point. Petrus even stepped toward the door to block it when Johan moved to exit. Yet when the group stopped for a scheduled break at 10:15 a.m., Johan announced that he needed to relieve himself due to a sudden, severe cramp. Petrus objected, pointing to the rhino visible in the mid-distance, but Johan dismissed the concern. He estimated the animal was far enough away and appeared focused on feeding. The tourists, uneasy but deferring to Johan's claimed expertise, remained in the vehicle as he stepped out. Black rhinoceroses can weigh up to 3,100 pounds, and despite their bulk, can accelerate to 35 miles per hour in seconds. Their horns, composed of compressed keratin fibers, grow up to 20 inches long and are used as battering rams capable of flipping vehicles. Unlike the more placid white rhino, black rhinos have notoriously poor eyesight but exceptional hearing, and are known for defensive aggression. They will charge perceived threats without warning, using their horns to gore or trample, causing catastrophic blunt force trauma. A rhino's charge generates enough kinetic energy to crush rib cages and shatter skulls on impact. Johan walked approximately 15 feet from the Land Cruiser, positioning himself partially behind a stunted shrub. He was unzipping his pants when the rhino lifted its massive head, ears rotating likely toward the sound of the vehicle door closing. For several seconds, the animal remained motionless, testing the air. Johan, concentrating on his immediate task, failed to notice this behavioral shift. One of the tourists later reported that the rhino had begun walking toward them before Johan even turned around. She had reached for Petrus's shoulder to alert him when the rhino broke into a full charge. The rhino covered the distance in less than 8 seconds, its bulk accelerating with the momentum of a small truck. Johan turned at the sound, the thundering hoofbeats unmistakable, but had no time to react. The rhino's horn caught him squarely in the torso, the impact lifting him off his feet and throwing him forward 6 feet. Witnesses heard the distinct crack of ribs shattering, multiple bones breaking simultaneously under the force of the blow. Johann hit the ground face first, and his body limped. The rhino did not stop. It trampled him, its front legs coming down on his back with its full weight concentrated into relatively small hooves. Blood spread rapidly from beneath Johann's head, soaking into the pale dust. His skull had fractured on impact with the ground, the trauma compounded by the rhino's weight crushing his cervical spine. The rhino lingered near the body, agitated and defensive. Petrus screamed into the radio, his voice breaking as he called for emergency assistance from park headquarters. He ordered the tourists to remain absolutely still and quiet while he closed the vehicle doors and kept the engine running as a shield. The rhino remained near Johann's body for nearly 3 minutes before slowly moving away, its territorial display complete. Park rangers arrived 9 minutes after Petrus's call, driving from Ocauquecho station approximately 4 miles away, with air horns blaring. The noise drove the rhino back toward the acacia cluster. Rangers confirmed Johann was deceased before moving his body. The park logged the incident as a protocol violation, resulting in a fatal wildlife encounter. Johann's body was transported to Windhoek for formal autopsy. The tourists departed Namibia 3 days later, all declining media interviews. Etosha officials issued a renewed advisory emphasizing that exiting vehicles in wildlife areas was prohibited without exception. It was May 11th, 2015, when the African sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the floodplains of northern Botswana in shades of amber and burnt orange. Along the riverfront of Chobe National Park, the air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of the bush, distant elephants trumpeting, fish eagles circling overhead, and low guttural grunts of massive creatures moving through the shallows just beyond the tree line. This stretch of river was one of the most biodiverse corridors on the continent, where elephants, buffalo, crocodiles, and one of Africa's most dangerous animals converged every evening as the heat gave way to golden hour. 27-year-old Ava Spratt had traveled to Botswana with 3 close friends after finishing a freelance project documenting nature travel destinations across southern Africa. Ava was a wildlife photography content creator who had recently shifted towards safari imagery, building a growing portfolio of close-range animal portraits that set her apart from the standard landscape photographers flooding the market. Her ambition was clear. She wanted shots that made the viewer feel as though they were standing face-to-face with Africa's most iconic species. That ambition had brought her here, to the edge of one of the most dangerous waterways on the continent. The group had booked a guided afternoon game drive along the riverfront, a popular excursion that followed dirt tracks running parallel to the water's edge. Their guide was experienced, a local professional who had spent years navigating these routes. He drove an open-sided 4x4 safari vehicle, elevated enough to provide safety but completely open on the sides, relying on passengers to remain seated at all times. As the afternoon wore on, the vehicle slowed near a narrow section of shoreline the guide mentioned was often used by hippos, moving between the river and grazing areas at dusk, a spot known among guides as a crossing point. The guide warned the group to stay seated, explaining that animals frequently used this exact path and that blocking it could provoke a charge. Hippopotamuses are widely regarded as the most dangerous large land animal in Africa, responsible for more human fatalities than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. Despite their rotund appearance, hippos are extraordinarily aggressive and capable of astonishing violence. An adult male can weigh over 4,000 pounds, yet move at speeds close to 20 miles per hour on land, faster than most humans can sprint. Hippos do not attack to feed. They attack because they perceive a threat to their territory or their path between water and land. When a hippo charges, there is no bluff. What makes them particularly unpredictable is their behavior at dusk. They follow established routes from river to grazing land with rigid consistency, and any obstacle along that route is treated as a direct threat. The response is immediate and violent. Ava spotted a large hippo partially submerged near the shore, ears twitching and nostrils flaring above the waterline. The proximity was closer than anything she had captured before, and the fading light created exactly the dramatic conditions she had been chasing. She stood up from her seat, bracing one foot on the side rail and leaning her upper body outside the open frame of the vehicle. The guide immediately told her to sit down, but she remained standing, adjusting her camera for a few more seconds, her torso now fully outside the vehicle's profile. That was the fatal mistake. The hippo had been preparing to move inland along its established crossing route, the same route the vehicle was now partially blocking. When the animal registered the vehicle and the figure protruding from its side, it surged from the water with terrifying speed, charging directly toward the track. The guide slammed the accelerator, but the track sloped toward the riverbank, and the rear wheels hit loose sand churned up by previous vehicles. The tires spun briefly before catching traction, and the sudden movement threw Ava off balance while she was leaning outside the frame of the vehicle, leaving her no way to recover. She fell from the open side, hitting the ground beside the track. The charging hippo reached her within seconds. Weighing over 2 tons and moving at full speed, it struck her with its front body and knocked her to the ground, then continued forward along the crossing path, trampling her as it forced its way past the vehicle rather than stopping to attack. The impact caused devastating injuries, crushed ribs, severe chest trauma, shattered pelvic bones, and massive internal bleeding that began immediately. The hippo appeared focused on clearing the path and quickly moved back toward the shallows, disappearing into the water within moments. The guide drove forward several meters before stopping and radioing for emergency assistance. A patrol unit from the nearest checkpoint was dispatched immediately. Ava was unconscious when the response team arrived, her breathing shallow and irregular. She was transported toward the nearest medical facility outside the reserve, but died from severe internal injuries before reaching the hospital. The official report listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma, consistent with being trampled by a large animal. The investigation concluded that while the vehicle had stopped closer to the crossing route than intended, the fatal sequence was triggered by the passenger standing and leaning outside the vehicle during an active wildlife encounter. The guide was questioned during the review, but was cleared after officials determined the safety instructions had been given before the stop. The wildlife photography community responded with grief and frustration, many noting that the pressure to capture increasingly dramatic content was pushing creators into situations no photograph was worth. It was August 14th, 2016, and the golden grasslands of Masai Mara National Reserve stretched endlessly under the blazing Kenyan sun. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the savanna as acacia trees dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels watching over one of Africa's most spectacular wildlife sanctuaries. Patricia Thornfield, known to everyone as Patty, sat in the back of an open-air safari vehicle beside her new husband James, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the magnificent scenery around them. At 27, the dental hygienist from Portland had dreamed of this moment for years, saving every penny from her modest salary to afford this luxury honeymoon safari that represented the adventure of a lifetime. Patty had always been captivated by African wildlife documentaries, spending countless evenings watching National Geographic specials and dreaming of the day she would witness these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. Her friends knew her as someone with an adventurous spirit who was always ready to try something new, though her actual outdoor experience was limited to weekend camping trips in the Oregon mountains. The couple had been married just 2 weeks earlier in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. This safari represented not just their honeymoon, but the fulfillment of a shared dream that had brought them together 3 years earlier when they met at a wildlife photography exhibition in downtown Portland. Their guide, a seasoned Maasai ranger named Joseph, had positioned their vehicle about 30 yards from a pride of lions that had emerged from the tall grass to rest in the shade of a large acacia tree. The pride consisted of 2 adult females, several cubs, and a magnificent male whose impressive mane caught the golden light of the setting sun. African lions are apex predators that live in complex social structures called prides, typically consisting of related females, their offspring, and one or more dominant males. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, with powerful jaws capable of delivering bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch. Lions are naturally curious, but can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats or unusual movements. Their hunting instincts are triggered by sudden motions, elevated positions, or anything that resembles the behavior of prey animals trying to escape. Joseph had given his standard safety briefing before departing from the lodge, emphasizing the critical importance of remaining seated and quiet during wildlife encounters. Despite these warnings, and James's gentle reminders to stay seated, Patty's excitement overcame her caution. She slowly rose from her seat in the back of the vehicle, believing that the 90-foot distance between them and the lions provided adequate safety. The moment Patty stood up, the male lion's demeanor changed completely. His head snapped toward the vehicle, his amber eyes locking onto the sudden movement and elevated silhouette that his predatory instincts immediately identified as potential prey. Without warning, the 400-pound predator exploded into motion with devastating power. His powerful hind legs propelled him across the 30 feet of open ground in 3 massive bounds, each stride covering more distance than seemed physically possible for such a large animal. The massive male landed directly on top of Patty with bone-crushing force, his weight and momentum driving her backward into the vehicle's floor with devastating impact. The lion's powerful jaws found Patty's neck with surgical precision, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and bone, while his bite force crushed her cervical vertebrae instantly. Joseph immediately fired warning shots from his rifle, the sharp cracks echoing across the savanna as he tried to drive the lion away. James lunged forward desperately, trying to grab his wife, but the predator's massive frame filled the entire back section of the vehicle. Patty's body went limp within seconds as the lion's devastating bite severed her spinal cord and major blood vessels. Her expensive camera fell from her hands and shattered on the vehicle's floor. The male lion maintained his grip on Patty's neck for several more seconds before Joseph's continued rifle fire finally convinced him to release his victim and leap from the vehicle. With remarkable skill, Joseph managed to start the engine and slowly reverse away from the pride while James cradled Patty's lifeless body. The drive back to the lodge took 20 agonizing minutes, with Joseph radioing ahead for medical assistance that everyone knew would be too late. Park officials launched an immediate investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols and interviewing witnesses. The attacking lion was tracked and relocated to a more remote section of the reserve, as wildlife authorities determined that his behavior was a natural response to perceived prey rather than abnormal aggression. Patty's death sent shockwaves through the safari tourism industry and prompted renewed emphasis on safety briefings and passenger compliance with guide instructions. Her family struggled to understand how their daughter's dream adventure had ended in such tragedy, while James faced the devastating reality of returning home alone from what should have been the happiest trip of their lives. It was August 14th, 2015, and the sprawling wilderness of a private game reserve near Hoedspruit, South Africa, stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. The landscape was a patchwork of golden grasslands and scattered acacia trees, with distant mountains creating a dramatic backdrop for one of Africa's most pristine wildlife sanctuaries. Robert Hutchinson navigated his rented Toyota Land Cruiser along the dusty track, his wife Karen in the passenger seat, while their 2 children, 14-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Dylan, pressed their faces against the back windows. The Hutchinson family had arrived from suburban Connecticut 3 days earlier, fulfilling Robert's lifelong dream of experiencing an African safari. At 41, Robert worked as a marketing executive for a pharmaceutical company, a demanding career that left little time for the adventure he craved. This trip represented years of saving and planning, and Robert was determined to capture every moment on his expensive new camera. The private reserve allowed self-drive safaris, giving visitors freedom to explore while following strict safety guidelines. During orientation, the reserve manager had been explicit. Stay on designated roads, keep windows mostly closed, never turn off your engine near predators, and maintain at least 50 meters distance from lions. After 2 days of peaceful wildlife viewing, Robert had begun seeing these warnings as overly cautious suggestions rather than life-saving protocols. This particular afternoon, the Hutchinsons had been following a pride of lions for nearly an hour. 3 adult females, 2 adolescent males, and 4 cubs tumbled and played near a watering hole. Other vehicles had come and gone, maintaining proper distance, but Robert wanted more. He wanted the photograph that would make his colleagues jealous, the image that would prove he had experienced something extraordinary. African lions are apex predators living in complex social structures called prides, typically consisting of related females, their offspring, and a coalition of males. Adult females do most of the hunting and are fiercely protective of their cubs, viewing any potential threat with immediate aggression. Lions can sprint at speeds up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts and possess bite forces exceeding 600 pounds per square inch. Despite their familiarity with safari vehicles, lions remain wild predators with unpredictable behavior, especially when they perceive threats to their young or territory. Robert steered the Land Cruiser off the designated track, driving across virgin grassland to position closer to the pride. He maneuvered to within 20 meters of the lions, far closer than safety protocols allowed. Robert rolled down his window completely, extending his camera outside for an unobstructed shot. Karen opened her window halfway, caught up in the excitement. The lionesses rose from their resting positions, their body language shifting from relaxed to alert. Their ears swiveled forward, focusing on the vehicle, and their tails began to twitch in a warning pattern. Robert fired off a rapid series of shots, the camera's shutter clicking loudly. One female took several steps towards the vehicle, her head lowered and her eyes fixed on the open windows. Robert finally recognized the danger and decided they needed to leave immediately. He shifted into reverse, but the Land Cruiser's rear wheels spun uselessly. The soft ground near the watering hole, saturated from recent rains and animal traffic, had turned into deceptive mud beneath the dry surface crust. The more Robert accelerated, the deeper the rear wheels sank. The grinding of spinning tires and the revving engine created a harsh mechanical noise that echoed across the grassland. The lionesses interpreted the sound and the vehicle's lurching movements as aggressive behavior. Karen suggested they call for help on the radio, but Robert was convinced he could free the vehicle himself. He opened his door and stepped out to assess the situation, ignoring Karen's protests. The moment his feet touched the ground, the lead lioness charged. She covered the 20 meters in less than 3 seconds, her powerful body moving with terrifying speed across the grassland. Robert tried to scramble back into the vehicle, but the lioness reached him before he could pull his legs inside. Her jaws clamped onto his thigh, her 4-inch canine teeth penetrating deep into the muscle. Robert screamed and grabbed the doorframe, trying to pull himself up, but the lioness's weight dragged him back down. She shook her head violently, and Robert's grip on the doorframe failed. Karen screamed and lunged across the center console, trying to grab Robert's arms and pull him back inside. The lioness maintained her grip on Robert's leg and began dragging him away from the vehicle. A second lioness, emboldened by the first's attack, approached the driver's side. She reared up and thrust her head through the open door, her front paws on the driver's seat. Karen released Robert and tried to scramble back to the passenger side, but the lioness's claws raked across her back and shoulders. Dylan grabbed the radio handset and pressed the emergency button, screaming for help. His panicked voice transmitted across the reserve's emergency frequency. Emma pulled her brother away from the front seats, and both children huddled in the rear cargo area. The first lioness had dragged Robert approximately 10 meters from the vehicle. Her jaws released his leg and clamped onto his throat, crushing his trachea and severing the carotid artery. Robert's struggles weakened rapidly as blood loss and oxygen deprivation took effect. The second lioness pulled Karen halfway out of the driver's door, her powerful jaws closing on Karen's neck. Karen's body went limp within seconds. The attack had lasted approximately 2 minutes when a reserve ranger vehicle appeared on a nearby ridge. The ranger had been conducting a routine patrol when Dylan's emergency transmission came through. He immediately drove toward the GPS coordinates while radioing for backup and firing his rifle into the air. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed across the grassland. The two lionesses released their victims and backed away from the vehicle, startled by the unfamiliar sound. The ranger reached the Land Cruiser within 90 seconds of firing the warning shots. He found Emma and Dylan traumatized but physically unharmed in the back of the vehicle. Robert and Karen lay motionless on the ground near the driver's side. The ranger immediately called for medical evacuation while checking for vital signs. Robert had already succumbed to his injuries, his throat wound catastrophic. Karen had a faint pulse, but her neck injuries were severe. The ranger applied pressure to her wounds and tried to stabilize her, but she lost consciousness and died before the medical helicopter arrived 12 minutes later. Additional rangers arrived and secured the scene while the children were evacuated. Emma and Dylan were airlifted to a hospital in Johannesburg for treatment of shock. The investigation revealed that Robert had violated multiple safety protocols, most critically exiting the vehicle in the presence of lions. The tragedy devastated the extended Hutchinson family back in Connecticut and sent shockwaves through the safari tourism industry. The reserve implemented additional safety measures, including mandatory GPS tracking with automatic alerts when vehicles left designated roads. The lions involved were not euthanized, as wildlife authorities determined the incident resulted entirely from human error. It was August 11th, 2014, and the African sun hung heavy over the private game reserve outside Hoedspruit, Limpopo, South Africa. The afternoon air shimmered with heat as a safari vehicle rolled slowly along a dirt track, its passengers scanning the acacia-dotted landscape for wildlife. Marek Volin was a 46-year-old Czech-born mechanical technician who had spent the past decade working short-term industrial contracts throughout Germany. This safari was his first trip to Africa, booked as a budget add-on during a 3-day business layover in Johannesburg. His co-workers had described him as practical and direct, someone who approached problems with mechanical logic. Fellow tourists on the safari would later tell investigators that Marek had been dismissive of safety protocols from the start, repeatedly commenting that predators were lazy during the day and that guides exaggerated dangers to maintain control. He carried a small handheld camcorder and had been filming constantly, stating he wanted to capture rare moments his friends back home would never see. His confidence around wildlife bordered on recklessness, and he had already been reminded twice to remain seated during animal sightings. The reserve stretched across 15,000 acres of bushveld, characterized by tall golden grass, scattered thorn trees, and rocky outcroppings. African lions are among the most formidable predators on the continent, with females typically weighing between 260 and 400 pounds and possessing explosive speed over short distances. Their hunting strategy relies on ambush and concealment. Female lions do the majority of hunting for their pride, using tall grass and terrain features to remain invisible until the moment of attack. Their bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, concentrated through powerful jaws designed to crush vertebrae and windpipes. Most critically, lionesses with cubs are exceptionally dangerous, their maternal instinct overriding any natural wariness of humans or vehicles. The safari vehicle had stopped after the guide spotted a lion cub partially tangled in thorn brush, approximately 40 yards from the track. The young animal was bleating loudly, its cries carrying across the afternoon stillness. The guide immediately warned everyone to remain seated and explained in clear terms that the mother was almost certainly nearby, hidden in the grass. He radioed to other guides in the area, informing them of the situation and their stationary position. Marek began filming the cub, zooming in on its struggles. After several minutes, he became visibly agitated, loudly insisting that the cub looked injured and that someone should intervene. Other tourists told him to listen to the guide. The guide repeated his warning, explaining that approaching would likely trigger a defensive attack and that the cub was not actually trapped, merely momentarily caught. Marek continued arguing, his camera still recording, stating that the guide's job was to protect tourists, not abandon helpless animals. Then, despite the guide's explicit command to stay seated, Marek opened the side door and stepped out onto the dirt, keeping his camera running as he walked toward the cub. The recovered footage showed everything. As Marek approached to within 15 yards, The cub abruptly stopped vocalizing. The video shook slightly as he stepped closer, using his foot to brush aside low branches. The camera's microphone picked up the guide shouting for him to get back in the vehicle. Then, barely audible beneath the sound of Merrick's breathing, there was a low, rumbling growl. The lioness struck in a rapid defensive lunge to recover her cub, exploding from grass that had concealed her completely. She covered the distance in less than 2 seconds, launching herself at Merrick's back with her full 330-pound weight. The impact drove him face-first into the ground. Screams erupted from the safari vehicle as the lioness clamped her massive jaws onto the back of Merrick's neck and upper spine, her teeth penetrating deep into tissue and vertebrae. She dragged him several feet through the dirt, her powerful neck muscles shaking him. Merrick's arms moved weakly, his fingers scraping at the ground in futile attempts to crawl. The lioness repositioned her grip, biting down again with crushing force on his shoulder and upper back. Blood darkened the earth beneath them. The cub, now silent, retreated deeper into the brush. The lioness delivered a final bite to Merrick's neck, a technique lions use to sever the spinal cord. Johann radioed reserve control immediately, reporting a fatal attack and requesting armed backup. The lioness remained near the body for several minutes before slowly walking back into the tall grass, still watching the vehicle. Armed rangers arrived 18 minutes later, approaching cautiously after confirming the lioness had withdrawn to a distance. Merrick Vollen was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed cause of death as massive trauma to the cervical spine and neck, with secondary injuries including puncture wounds to the upper back, shoulder, and skull. Severe blood loss and spinal cord transection indicated death likely occurred within 2 to 3 minutes of the initial attack. The reserve issued a brief statement emphasizing that the deceased had violated explicit safety protocols. No criminal charges were filed. Investigators secured the original camera media, and the device was later returned to Merrick's family after review. It was April 12, 2015, and the early morning sun cast long shadows across the Okavango Delta's maze of channels, the water deceptively calm and inviting. Lena Fox waded into the shallows with her waterproof camera held high, laughing as she filmed herself moving deeper into territory that local guides had explicitly warned her to avoid. Lena Fox was a 22-year-old lifestyle and wellness influencer from Calabasas, California. Her social media, a carefully curated aesthetic of luxury travel, green juices, and performative self-discovery. Her content often showcased daring, close interactions with exotic environments, always accompanied by breathless commentary about pushing boundaries and living authentically. Friends described her as fearless to the point of recklessness, someone who routinely dismissed safety protocols as obstacles to genuine experience rather than essential precautions, and who sought out situations most people would consider too risky. She had arrived at the Okavango Delta 4 days earlier, staying at a modest lodge she openly criticized as below her brand's standard. Her goal, repeatedly stated to other guests, was to film herself wading among crocodiles for authentic proximity footage. Friends and family noted she had no formal wildlife training. Her past travel content in Bali and Tulum involved similar risky encounters with animals and sacred sites, survived more by luck than knowledge, always framed with captions about trusting the universe. What Lena either didn't know or chose to ignore was the lethal efficiency of the predator she was treating as a photo opportunity. Nile crocodiles are commonly reported up to about 16 to 20 feet and over 1,000 pounds in exceptional cases. They are ambush predators capable of extremely fast, short-range lunges from near stillness. Their hunting strategy relies on patience, remaining motionless for hours before striking with devastating precision. That morning, the lodge manager had specifically warned Lena against entering the water near the eastern channel, pointing to fresh slide marks in the mud where crocodiles had entered the water. She had signed a liability waiver, acknowledging the dangers, but told the manager he was being dramatic. A group of 4 tourists and a 19-year-old lodge assistant named Ian watched from the wooden deck about 50 feet away as Lena waded in. The water reached her thighs, then her waist. Ian shouted for her to come back, his voice carrying across the water with increasing urgency. He said that Lena turned toward him, rolling her eyes and waving dismissively while continuing to film. She had spotted 3 subadult crocodiles partially submerged near a muddy bank, approximately 20 feet to her left, their eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. She began deliberately splashing to get their attention. What she failed to notice was the much larger shape positioned in deeper water, directly ahead, distinguishable from a log only by the occasional blink of its reptilian eyes. Ian said that the attack came without warning. The large crocodile surged forward from its position, covering the distance in seconds. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of conical teeth before clamping down on Lena's right ankle with crushing force. The camera fell from her hands, disappearing into the churning water and likely buried in the silt. Lena grabbed desperately at the reeds nearby, her fingers tearing through the vegetation as the crocodile began its death roll, a spinning maneuver designed to tear chunks from prey too large to swallow whole. The water around her turned red, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Each rotation of the roll pulled her deeper, her head going under repeatedly as she fought to breathe. Ian and another lodge worker rushed to the water's edge, using long poles and flotation aids to try to reach her, shouting and striking at the water. One inexperienced assistant briefly waded in up to his waist before being pulled back by the others, showing the danger of entering the water while the crocodile had a secure grip. The crocodile's tail thrashed violently. After approximately 3 minutes of violent struggle, Lena's movements became weak, then ceased entirely. The crocodile submerged completely, dragging her body into deeper water. Ian radioed the main lodge immediately. A rescue boat arrived about 15 minutes later with additional staff, medical equipment, and rifles. Shots were fired into the water in a desperate, largely ineffective attempt to deter the crocodile. After another 30 minutes of searching, they found her remains in 7 feet of water, partially hidden beneath an undercut bank. The coroner in Maun determined she died from massive trauma and drowning. Local authorities conducted a brief investigation, interviewing witnesses and reviewing the lodge's safety protocols. The crocodile responsible was never located or identified among the dozens inhabiting that section of the delta. Her camera was never recovered. Her family received her remains 3 weeks later after complicated repatriation procedures. It was September 3rd, 2016. When the late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the sprawling bushveld of Kruger National Park, one of South Africa's most famous game reserves. The dry winter air carried the scent of dust and dried grass as temperatures began to cool, drawing predators out from their midday resting spots and into the open. 32-year-old Marianne Miller sat in the passenger seat of a rented sedan, camera in hand, scanning the roadside vegetation for movement as her boyfriend navigated the narrow tar road deeper into the reserve. Marianne had built a modest but growing audience as a travel vlogger, documenting wildlife encounters and scenic destinations across southern Africa. This self-drive safari was meant to be the centerpiece of her latest series, a multi-day journey through Kruger National Park, one of the continent's most iconic wildlife destinations. The couple had entered the park that morning, collecting their entry permit along with a printed set of rules that made one instruction unmistakably clear: visitors must remain inside their vehicles at all times unless within designated rest camps or fenced picnic areas. Signs reinforcing this rule appeared at regular intervals along the road, some featuring illustrations of lions and leopards to emphasize the ever-present danger lurking just beyond the window glass. The reserve is home to Africa's full complement of apex predators, and every year thousands of visitors safely observe them by following one simple principle: the vehicle is the barrier. By late afternoon, the couple had already logged several successful sightings. Then, along a quiet stretch of road bordered by thick golden grass, they spotted what every visitor hopes to see. Several lions lay partially concealed in the vegetation just meters from the road, their tawny coats blending seamlessly with the dry surroundings. Other vehicles had already slowed nearby, windows cracked open just enough for camera lenses. African lions are the continent's largest predators, with males weighing up to around 420 pounds and females averaging closer to 260, built from pure muscle and instinct. Despite their reputation for laziness during the heat of the day, lions are ambush hunters capable of explosive acceleration, reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour in short bursts. What makes lions especially dangerous to humans on foot is their predatory response to movement. A person standing upright outside a vehicle no longer appears as part of the car's silhouette. To a lion, that figure instantly registers as something separate, something vulnerable, something worth investigating. Marianne's boyfriend stopped the car so she could film through the open window. The footage from that angle was decent, but partially obstructed by the tall grass. After a few moments, Marianne opened the passenger door and stepped out onto the road, camera raised, moving several steps away from the vehicle to get a clearer line of sight toward the resting Pride. That single decision sealed her fate. The moment her feet touched the ground, the dynamic changed. One of the closer lions lifted its head, ears rotating forward, eyes locked onto the figure now standing in the open. A second lion, previously hidden in the thick grass on the opposite side, lowered its body and began advancing in a crouched position, using the vegetation as cover to close the gap without being detected. The distance between the concealed lion and Marianne was short. The charge came fast and silent, the animal covering the ground in seconds before she could react. She turned back toward the car, but the lion was already on her. It struck her from behind with tremendous force, knocking her to the ground beside the vehicle. The lion's claws raked across her back and shoulders, tearing through clothing and skin in a single motion. Its jaws bit into the neck and shoulder area, causing severe trauma and heavy bleeding. The attack lasted only seconds, but caused catastrophic injuries. Deep lacerations from the claws tore muscle across her upper body, while the bite caused severe trauma to the neck and major blood vessels, leading to rapid blood loss. She lost consciousness quickly from the injuries. Her boyfriend remained inside the vehicle and laid on the horn repeatedly, the blaring sound eventually causing the lion to release and step back into the grass. Other drivers kept their distance, but also used their horns, trying to scare the animal away without leaving their vehicles. Marianne lay motionless on the ground beside the open passenger door. By the time the nearest visitors reached a rest camp and alerted staff, rangers were already being dispatched to the scene. They confirmed she had died from the injuries sustained during the attack. The combination of severe blood loss and trauma had been fatal before medical help could arrive. The investigation determined that all park safety protocols had been properly communicated and that the attack was a direct result of the victim leaving the vehicle in an active predator zone. Officials reiterated that even when lions appear calm and stationary, they remain fully aware of their surroundings and can transition from rest to attack in seconds. The travel community reacted with shock, many pointing out that the desire for content had overridden basic survival instincts. Her family did not make public statements, but privately expressed devastation at the loss. It was December 11th, 2013, and the endless plains of the Serengeti stretched to the horizon under the brilliant blue Tanzanian sky. Richard Castellano, known to his friends as Rick, walked nervously behind his guide as they tracked a herd of Cape buffalo through the tall grass. At 51, the successful construction company owner from Chicago was on his first African safari, having booked an expensive walking tour as part of his response to a recent divorce and midlife crisis. Rick had built his construction business from nothing, working 18-hour days for 20 years to create a company that employed over 200 people. His recent divorce had left him questioning his priorities and searching for adventures that would prove he was still capable of handling challenges beyond the boardroom. The walking safari took place on a private concession bordering the Serengeti, one of the few areas where tourists were permitted to explore the bush on foot under armed supervision. For Rick, it represented the ultimate test of his courage and stamina, a chance to experience Africa's wildlife up close rather than from the safety of a vehicle. He had dismissed his guide's safety briefings as overcautious, convinced that his years of business success had prepared him for any challenge the African bush might present. Cape buffalo are considered one of Africa's Big Five most dangerous animals, with adult bulls weighing up to 1,900 pounds and possessing a temperament that makes them unpredictable and aggressive. They have excellent hearing and eyesight and will charge at perceived threats with devastating force. Their massive horns form a solid shield across the top of their heads called a boss, and they use these weapons to gore and trample anything they consider a threat. Cape buffalo are responsible for more hunter deaths in Africa than any other animal, and they have been known to circle back and ambush humans who have wounded them. The walking tour had been proceeding cautiously for 2 hours when the group encountered a lone bull buffalo grazing in a clearing about 100 yards ahead. The guide, an experienced tracker named Joseph, immediately signaled for the group to stop and remain absolutely still while he assessed the situation. Joseph recognized the danger immediately. Lone buffalo bulls were often old males that had been expelled from the herd and were typically more aggressive and unpredictable than animals in groups. He began slowly backing the group away from the area, planning to circle around the buffalo and continue their walk in a safer direction. Rick, however, saw the encounter as an opportunity to prove his courage to the other tourists in the group. Against Joseph's urgent whispered instructions, Rick began moving toward the buffalo, pulling out his camera to capture what he believed would be an impressive photograph. The buffalo had been aware of the human group's presence from the moment they entered the clearing, but had shown no immediate signs of aggression. What Rick failed to understand was that the buffalo's apparent calm was actually the behavior of a predator assessing potential threats and planning his response. When Rick moved within 20 feet of the massive animal, the buffalo made his decision to attack. The bull's head snapped up from his grazing, his small eyes focusing on Rick with deadly intensity as his muscles tensed for the charge that would follow. The Cape buffalo's attack came with explosive speed that caught Rick completely off guard. The massive bull covered the 20 feet between them in 3 powerful strides, his 1,500-pound frame moving with surprising agility as he bore down on his target. Rick tried to turn and run, but his out-of-shape body was no match for the buffalo's incredible speed and power. The bull's massive head struck Rick in the back with bone-crushing force, sending him sprawling face-first into the dusty ground while his camera flew from his hands. The buffalo's assault was methodical and devastating. His massive hooves trampled Rick's prone body, while his sharp horns gored repeatedly into his victim's torso and limbs. Each impact caused additional trauma, as the bull's enormous weight and strength turned Rick's body into a broken, bleeding mass. Joseph fired warning shots from his rifle, the sharp cracks echoing across the savanna as he tried to drive the enraged buffalo away from his client. The other tourists screamed in terror as they witnessed the graphic violence, several of them becoming physically ill from the sight of Rick's mangled body. The buffalo continued his assault for several more minutes, his fury driving him to ensure that the perceived threat was completely eliminated. Rick's desperate screams had ceased within the first minute of the attack, but the bull continued trampling and goring his lifeless body with mechanical precision. Eventually, Joseph's continued rifle fire convinced the buffalo to abandon his attack and retreat into the tall grass. Rick died from massive trauma before the medical evacuation helicopter could reach their remote location. His body bore the unmistakable marks of a buffalo attack, multiple gore wounds, crushed bones, and internal injuries that no human could survive. The investigation revealed that Rick had violated every safety protocol by approaching the buffalo against his guide's explicit instructions. The attacking bull was tracked by park rangers but left undisturbed, as the attack had occurred in his natural territory due to human error rather than abnormal animal behavior. Rick's death sent shockwaves through his family and business community in Chicago, while serving as a tragic reminder that Africa's wildlife demanded respect and caution from even the most successful and confident visitors. It was July 8th, 2015. And the afternoon heat shimmered across the walkways of a safari park, a mid-sized wildlife facility in Southern California, where Patricia Holbrook was about to discover that some complaints end in blood. Patricia Holbrook, 52, was a successful real estate agent who had built her career on one simple principle. She always got what she wanted. She didn't tolerate incompetence and measured her worth by how quickly people responded to her demands. What Patricia didn't understand was that nature operates by different rules, ones that don't care about customer satisfaction or social status. Patricia had purchased premium VIP tour tickets for herself and her 16-year-old daughter, Emma. The tour was marketed as an intimate experience limited to 12 guests, offering close-up observation opportunities unavailable to general admission visitors. Patricia saw this as money well spent, not for education, but for bragging rights and social media content. The group arrived at the African lion habitat around 2:30 p.m., where tour guide Michael Torres began explaining lion social structure and conservation efforts. The facility housed 6 lions, including Akili, a 450-pound male, and 5 females in a large enclosure separated from visitors. Park protocols were explicit. Guests must remain on designated viewing platforms. Photography was permitted without flash, and no attempts to touch or feed the animals were allowed under any circumstances. Patricia immediately interrupted Michael's presentation, loudly complaining that the viewing angle didn't offer good photo opportunities for her Instagram account. She demanded that Michael reposition the entire group or allow her closer access to the barrier. When Michael politely declined, citing safety regulations, Patricia's demeanor shifted to outright hostility. The situation escalated when Patricia stepped off the designated viewing platform while Michael was answering another visitor's question. She walked past the outer standoff rail and positioned herself directly against the inner barrier, a reinforced panel with a narrow keeper access gap at one end, designed for staff to pass feeding equipment through. Michael noticed immediately and called out for her to return, explaining that the area beyond the standoff rail was strictly off-limits. Patricia ignored him. She told herself the gap was small, that the lion was resting 20 feet away, and that she just needed one good shot. She extended her iPhone through the keeper access gap, angling for a close-up. The shot wasn't good enough. She leaned further in, her shoulder pressing against the gap, her phone hand reaching deeper into the restricted space. When her daughter called from the platform for her to come back, Patricia didn't even turn around. What Patricia didn't appreciate, what most people standing outside a lion enclosure never fully internalize, is that African lions are not simply large cats. They are apex ambush predators, capable of covering 30 feet in under a second, with forepaws that can generate enough force to collapse a zebra's spine on contact. Michael radioed for security and began walking toward Patricia, telling her this was her final warning. He never finished the sentence. Akili crossed the 20 feet in seconds. The lion's paw drove through the keeper access gap with full force, but Patricia had leaned so far that it wasn't her arm that took the blow. The claws connected with her neck and upper shoulder, the hooked grip pulling her violently sideways into the barrier. Patricia made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, something shorter, cut off, before her legs gave out beneath her. Michael ran forward shouting and waving his arms while other staff arrived with air horns. The first radio call overlapped with another channel, costing a few seconds that felt much longer before the right team was dispatched. They discharged the horns repeatedly. Akili backed away. Patricia was on the ground, unresponsive. The wound at her neck was bleeding heavily, the kind of blood loss that doesn't wait. Staff applied emergency pressure dressings immediately, but the damage was severe. A claw had torn through the tissue along the side of her neck, compromising major vasculature. By the time paramedics arrived, she had lost consciousness, her breathing shallow and irregular, her pulse weak and fading. She was transported to the nearest trauma center, but the blood loss had been too rapid and too significant. Patricia Holbrook was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. She was 52 years old. It was November 2nd, 2017, and the headlights of the tour bus cut through the absolute darkness of Tsavo East National Park. The engine had fallen silent 20 minutes earlier, and what had begun as a minor inconvenience was rapidly transforming into something far more sinister. Ramesh Patel, a 58-year-old retired hardware wholesaler from Leicester, had been traveling through East Africa for 2 weeks, his first trip abroad since his wife Angeli's death from cancer 8 months earlier. His adult children had encouraged the journey, hoping it might help him process his grief. The safari tour had been a last-minute addition to his itinerary, booked through a budget operator that offered rates significantly lower than established companies. During the mandatory safety briefing that morning, the guide had emphasized repeatedly that passengers must never leave the vehicle under any circumstances. The tour bus, a converted truck with open sides and bench seating for 12 passengers, had been making the return journey to the main lodge when the engine began sputtering around 7:15 p.m. Kimani, the driver, kept his torch trained on the engine and positioned himself so the bus remained between him and the grass line. His attempts to restart the engine produced only clicking sounds. Several passengers noticed movement in the darkness beyond. Within minutes, at least 5 lions had materialized from the bush, their forms becoming visible as they crossed through the beam of the headlights. The Australian couple began filming on their phones. Kimani climbed back into the driver's seat and radioed the main office for assistance, reporting their GPS coordinates. The office confirmed a rescue vehicle would be dispatched, estimating roughly 30 minutes for arrival. African lions are the only truly social big cats, living in prides of up to 30 individuals that cooperate in hunting and territory defense. Adult male lions in the wild typically weigh between about 330 and 420 pounds. Even so, a fully grown male can easily overpower a lone human. Their night vision, aided by a reflective layer behind the retina, makes them far more effective in low light than a human. Most critically, male lions are territorial and will attack perceived threats to assert dominance, particularly after dark when their confidence peaks. The lions continued their slow approach, occasionally pausing to watch the bus. Their movements were unhurried but deliberate, closing the distance by increments. Kimani instructed all passengers to remain seated and silent, explaining that lions typically would not attack a vehicle unless provoked. Another passenger later reported that Ramesh seemed almost manic, insisting repeatedly that the animals could sense fear and that showing confidence was the solution. Moments later, Ramesh stood and moved toward the open side of the bus. Kimani grabbed his arm, pleading with him to sit down. Ramesh pulled free, stating that he would demonstrate how to properly handle wildlife. Multiple passengers were filming as Ramesh positioned himself on the step at the side exit, 1 foot on the ground. He raised his arms above his head and shouted toward the closest lion, a male approximately 40 feet away. The lion closed the gap in seconds. The attack was captured on 4 separate phones from different angles. The videos were grainy and overexposed where the headlights hit. They showed the sequence well enough to corroborate witness statements. The male exploded forward with shocking acceleration, his massive body low to the ground as he closed the gap. Ramesh had no time to react. The impact knocked him completely off the bus step, his body slamming into the hard-packed earth with audible force. The lion's jaws clamped around Ramesh's throat before he could even attempt to rise, the predator's frame pinning him flat. The male began shaking his head violently side to side. Ramesh's arms, which had initially flailed against the lion's shoulders, went slack within 15 seconds. Blood spread rapidly across the pale dirt, appearing black in the artificial light. The lion maintained his grip for nearly a minute, applying crushing pressure that collapsed Ramesh's trachea and fractured cervical vertebrae. When the body had gone completely limp, the male released his hold momentarily before clamping down again on Ramesh's shoulder. He began dragging the body backward, away from the bus and out of the headlight beams. 2 female lions materialized from the darkness to join the male, their interest in the kill immediate. Within seconds, all 3 had dragged Ramesh approximately 60 feet from the bus, where they began feeding. Kimani had radioed park control the moment Ramesh stepped down. The rescue vehicle, already en route, diverted directly to their coordinates. Rangers arrived 25 minutes after the initial attack, equipped with spotlights, loudspeakers, and air horns. They fired rifle shots into the air to drive the lions away from what remained of Ramesh's body. The medical examiner's report, filed 2 days later, listed cause of death as primary cause: catastrophic cervical trauma with rapid hemorrhage. The report noted that Ramesh had suffered a crushed windpipe, fractured neck at the C3 and C4 vertebrae, and massive tissue damage to the throat and upper chest. Ramesh's body was repatriated to Leicester. Kenyan wildlife authorities seized the phone footage from all passengers as evidence and levied substantial fines against the company for negligence. The operator's license was suspended pending safety improvements. It was March 28, 2014. The afternoon sun casting long shadows across the golden savanna of Kruger National Park. The air shimmered with heat as a safari vehicle idled along the dusty road, its passengers adjusting cameras and binoculars, anticipating wildlife encounters. Lucas Van Heerden was a lanky, energetic 15-year-old from Pretoria, known among his classmates for his obsession with wildlife documentaries and his collection of animal facts. His biology teacher had written in his most recent report card that Lucas possessed genuine curiosity about the natural world, but struggled with impulse control and following directions. His bedroom walls were covered with posters of African megafauna, lions, elephants, rhinos, but his favorite had always been giraffes, which his parents said he found both majestic and approachable. This safari trip was a birthday gift from his parents, who had saved for months to afford the premium 3-day package through Kruger. Lucas had spent weeks planning what he wanted to photograph, creating detailed lists in his notebook. His mother, Annika, had made him promise repeatedly to follow all guide instructions, knowing her son's tendency to push boundaries. His father, Peter, had joked that Lucas would probably try to pet a lion if given the chance. The safari vehicle had been on the road for approximately 2 hours when the guide, a veteran ranger named Willem Botha, spotted a small group of 3 giraffes browsing acacia leaves about 50 yards from the road. He brought the open-topped Land Cruiser to a stop, reminding passengers in both English and Afrikaans to remain seated and keep their hands inside the vehicle. Adult giraffes stand up to 18 feet tall and weigh between 1,700 and 2,800 pounds. Their legs alone can be 6 feet long, composed almost entirely of dense muscle and bone. When threatened or irritated, a giraffe can deliver enormous, bone-shattering force, enough to fracture skulls and collapse ribs. These kicks are executed with surprising speed and precision, the result of millions of years of evolution, defending against Africa's apex predators. As the vehicle settled into stillness, Lucas retrieved a bag of baby carrots from his backpack, vegetables he had packed specifically hoping to feed animals, despite clear park regulations prohibiting feeding wildlife. His mother noticed immediately and grabbed his wrist, whispering sharply for him to put them away. Willem had turned to field a question on the far side of the vehicle, leaving a blind spot where the teens were. One of the giraffes, a young male, had begun moving closer to the vehicle, closing the distance to within a few feet of the open side, drawn either by curiosity or the scent of the carrots. The giraffe began stamping its front feet and swishing its tail, a sign of rising agitation at the vehicle's proximity. Lucas stood up on his seat, leaning over the side of the vehicle with his arm extended, a bright orange carrot clutched in his fingers. Annika lunged for him, her shout of warning drowned out by the excited chatter of other tourists. The giraffe, now less than 8 feet away, nearly parallel with the vehicle's open seating row, stopped browsing and lowered its head, focusing on the boy. In an instant, the giraffe pivoted sharply and lashed out sideways with a powerful backward kick, the hoof arcing through the open side of the vehicle at seat height and connecting with Lucas's upper chest and throat. Lucas's body jerked backward with tremendous force, his head snapping against the metal frame of the vehicle's roll bar with an audible crack that silenced the entire group. He crumpled into the footwell between seats, blood pouring from his nose and mouth, his chest visibly misshapen where ribs had collapsed inward. His mother screamed and tried to reach him, but there was barely room to move in the cramped, open-topped vehicle. Willem immediately radioed for emergency assistance while pulling a first aid kit from under his seat. He pushed past panicking passengers to reach Lucas, checking for a pulse and finding it erratic and weakening. A nearby ranger vehicle, returning from another call, swept round the bend and reached them in about 8 minutes. The medics attempted resuscitation for an additional 12 minutes before officially pronouncing Lucas dead at the scene. The preliminary assessment noted massive blunt force trauma to the chest and head, with probable skull fracture, crushed trachea, broken ribs, and severe internal bleeding. The Van Heerden family returned to Pretoria 3 days later, their other 2 safari days cancelled. Peter drove in silence while Annika sat in the passenger seat, still wearing the same clothes from the day of the incident. Kruger National Park's incident report led to enhanced safety briefings and stricter enforcement of the no-feeding policy. The safari company installed higher barriers on their vehicles and required guides to conduct more frequent head counts to ensure all passengers remained seated. Lucas's death received brief mention in Pretoria newspapers and was added to the park's internal safety training materials, joining dozens of other preventable tragedies. It was July 18, 2017, when the scorching Australian sun beat down on Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory of Australia, one of the most remote and dangerous wilderness regions in the country. The dry season had transformed the ancient landscape into a harsh, unforgiving environment where every shadow promised relief and every waterway beckoned with false promises of safety. 19-year-old Phoebe Galt had arrived at this remote wilderness with 2 close friends, their backpacks heavy with camera equipment and dreams of filming the perfect travel footage for their growing online following. Phoebe was no ordinary tourist. As a travel vlogger documenting her journey across northern Australia, she had spent months recording her trip, each video carefully crafted to capture the raw beauty and danger that drew thousands of visitors each year. Her followers expected footage from increasingly daring locations, and this ancient parkland represented the crown jewel of her expedition. The trio followed the marked walking trail to an official viewing platform overlooking a billabong system known to park staff as a high-risk crocodile area, a slow-moving river channel famous for its large population of saltwater crocodiles. Multiple warning signs lined the path in bold red lettering, stating that crocodiles inhabited these waters year-round and that visitors must remain within designated viewing zones at all times. These barriers created a clear boundary between safety and the wild. From the elevated platform, the river appeared deceptively peaceful. The muddy water moved lazily between mangrove-lined banks, its surface occasionally disturbed by gentle ripples that could have been wind or something far more dangerous below. The viewing area provided a good vantage point for photography, but Phoebe wanted something closer, more dramatic than the standard tourist shots. Saltwater crocodiles are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted killing machines that can grow over 15 feet long and weigh more than half a ton. These reptiles possess one of the strongest bite forces of any animal on Earth, capable of crushing bone with a single snap. Their hunting strategy relies on patience and stealth, often remaining motionless at the water's edge or just below the surface while waiting for prey to approach the shoreline. What makes them particularly dangerous is their ability to stay almost completely submerged while watching potential prey. Their eyes, nostrils, and ears sit on top of their heads, allowing them to observe without exposing their bodies. When they attack, they can surge forward with explosive power, launching from the water with terrifying speed in short bursts on land or in water. After several minutes on the platform, Phoebe made the decision that would cost her life. She stepped past the safety barrier and began walking down the sloping riverbank toward the water's edge, leaving the designated viewing area and moving into the restricted shoreline zone. One of her friends hesitated at the barrier and warned her not to go closer, but Phoebe kept moving, and the others followed a few steps behind with the camera equipment. The muddy shoreline was exactly the type of terrain park authorities warned visitors to avoid, soft ground that allowed crocodiles to approach silently. One friend stayed several steps back and urged Phoebe to return to the marked path, but she continued moving closer to the waterline, focused entirely on getting the perfect shot. The afternoon light was ideal for filming, and the calm river behind her looked harmless. Standing only a few feet from the edge, Phoebe turned her back to the water while her friend began recording. The muddy river behind her appeared still, but visibility was poor due to sediment that created perfect camouflage for predators. What she could not see was the massive saltwater crocodile that had been watching the group since they left the safety barrier, lying motionless in the shallows near the muddy bank. The attack came without warning. The crocodile, estimated at over 4.5 meters long, burst forward from the edge of the water, its jaws clamping down on her leg and hip, the enormous bite force knocking her off balance instantly. Instead of spinning immediately, the crocodile dragged her straight toward the water with powerful backward pulls, using its weight and grip to overpower her before she could react. Her friend screamed as the animal hauled her across the muddy bank and into the river. Once in deeper water, the crocodile began a violent death roll, twisting its body to subdue its prey and pull her fully underwater, the natural killing technique used by large crocodiles when resistance stops. The muddy current churned as the animal spun, and within seconds Phoebe disappeared beneath the surface. Her friends ran toward the bank but stopped at the edge, knowing entering the water could trigger another attack. The river quickly returned to its calm appearance, hiding the struggle that had taken place only moments earlier. The combination of massive trauma and drowning proved fatal within minutes. Other visitors heard the screaming and ran toward the parking area to alert park staff. Rangers, assisted by police, responded quickly, closing the section of river and initiating emergency protocols. Search operations were delayed until rangers determined the crocodile was no longer in the immediate area, allowing recovery teams to approach safely. Personal belongings and remains were recovered downstream several days later. The official cause of death was listed as injuries sustained during a crocodile attack, with drowning contributing to the fatal outcome. The investigation concluded that all safety precautions had been in place and that the incident occurred because the victim crossed the safety barrier and entered a restricted riverbank zone. Her family requested privacy while grieving, and the travel community mourned the loss of a young traveler whose search for the perfect shot led her too close to one of Australia's most dangerous predators. It was June 22nd, 2017, and the Chobe River wound lazily through the heart of Chobe National Park in Botswana, its muddy waters reflecting the intense blue of the African sky. Samuel Motsepe guided his boat full of eager tourists along the riverbank, pointing out hippos wallowing in the shallows and elephants coming down to drink in the late afternoon heat. At 35, Samuel was one of the most experienced guides in the park, with 12 years of leading boat safaris along this treacherous but spectacular waterway. Samuel had been born and raised in a village just outside the park boundaries, learning about the river and its dangers from childhood. His intimate knowledge of Chobe's wildlife and his natural storytelling ability had made him a favorite among tourists, and his recent promotion to senior guide status reflected his expertise and dedication to his craft. The afternoon safari had been proceeding perfectly until Samuel noticed that their boat's engine was beginning to overheat. The temperature gauge showed dangerous levels, and he knew that continuing to run the motor could result in permanent damage that would leave them stranded in one of Africa's most dangerous waterways. Samuel made the decision to beach the boat on a small island in the middle of the river, planning to let the engine cool down for 30 minutes before continuing their journey back to the lodge. He assured his nervous tourists that it would be a quick stop, though several of them expressed concern about leaving the safety of the boat in an area known to be heavily populated by Nile crocodiles. Nile crocodiles are among Africa's most dangerous predators, with large males reaching lengths of over 16 feet and weights exceeding 1,500 pounds. They are perfectly adapted ambush hunters that can remain motionless underwater for up to an hour, waiting for prey to come within striking distance. Their bite force exceeds 5,000 pounds per square inch, making them capable of crushing the bones of large mammals with ease. Crocodiles are opportunistic feeders that will attack anything that enters their territory, and they are particularly dangerous in areas where humans regularly disturb the water. Samuel waded into the knee-deep water to secure the boat's anchor, despite knowing that this section of the Chobe River was home to some of the largest crocodiles in Africa. His years of experience had made him perhaps overconfident about his ability to recognize and avoid danger. What Samuel didn't realize was that a massive 16-foot Nile crocodile had been lying motionless on the riverbed just 20 feet from where he entered the water. The ancient predator had been waiting in perfect ambush position, its prehistoric brain programmed to recognize the vibrations and disturbances that indicated potential prey entering its domain. The attack happened with lightning speed that left Samuel's tourists barely time to comprehend what they were witnessing. The massive crocodile exploded from the murky water like a prehistoric missile, its enormous jaws gaping open to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth as it launched itself at Samuel's legs. The crocodile's jaws clamped down on Samuel's thigh with devastating force, the massive teeth puncturing through muscle and bone, while the predator's bite force crushed his femur instantly. Samuel's scream of agony echoed across the water as the crocodile began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly to disorient its prey and cause maximum damage to tissue and bone. The death roll dragged Samuel underwater as the crocodile used its powerful tail and body to maintain momentum in the spinning attack. Samuel's desperate struggles created violent splashes on the surface as he fought to break free from the predator's grip, but the crocodile's hold was unbreakable. Samuel's body surfaced briefly before the crocodile pulled him under again. The massive reptile's death roll continued with mechanical precision, each rotation causing additional trauma to Samuel's already mangled leg while simultaneously drowning him in the muddy river water. The tourists in the boat screamed in horror as they watched their guide disappear beneath the churning surface, leaving only a spreading pool of blood to mark where the attack had occurred. Samuel's body surfaced one final time about 50 yards downstream, floating face down in the current before disappearing again beneath the murky water. The stranded tourists remained in their anchored boat for over 2 hours before a rescue team arrived in response to their overdue return. Park rangers conducted an extensive search of the area, but found no trace of Samuel's body, which had been carried downstream by the current. Samuel's remains were eventually recovered 3 days later, 2 miles downstream from the attack site. The condition of his body confirmed that he had been killed by a large crocodile, and the investigation revealed that he had violated park safety protocols by entering the water in a known crocodile habitat. The incident prompted immediate changes to boat safari procedures, requiring guides to use only designated landing areas with established safety measures. Samuel's death devastated his family and the local guiding community, while serving as a tragic reminder that even experienced professionals could fall victim to Africa's apex predators. It was October 8, 2017, and the dense forests of Bwindi Impenetrable National Park in Uganda rose steeply from the valley floor, their canopy shrouded in mist. The park is home to roughly half of the world's remaining mountain gorillas, and gorilla trekking had become one of Africa's most sought-after wildlife experiences. Vincent Kowalski had traveled from his home in Warsaw, Poland, specifically to photograph the park's habituated gorilla families during the peak trekking season. At 44, Vincent was an accomplished amateur wildlife photographer whose images had been featured in several European nature magazines. He had photographed dangerous animals on 3 continents, and each successful expedition had reinforced his belief that he possessed an almost supernatural ability to read animal behavior. Vincent's confidence had gradually transformed into arrogance, a dangerous mindset when dealing with wild primates. Vincent had hired a local guide team led by Moses, an experienced tracker with 20 years of experience working with Bwindi's gorilla families. The park's rules were explicit. maintain 7 meters distance from gorillas, limit visits to 1 hour, never make direct eye contact with silverback males, no flash photography, and absolutely no touching the animals under any circumstances. The two men had been working together for 3 days, and the relationship had become increasingly strained. Vincent constantly pushed to get closer to the gorillas, dismissing Moses's cautions as overcautious. On their 4th morning, Moses located a family group of 19 gorillas resting in a clearing. The family included a massive silverback male, several adult females, juveniles, and 2 infants. Mountain gorillas are among the world's most powerful primates, with adult silverback males weighing up to 400 pounds and possessing strength estimated at 10 times that of an adult human. Despite their generally peaceful nature, silverbacks are fiercely protective of their families and will attack perceived threats with devastating force. Their canine teeth can reach 2 inches in length, and their bite force exceeds 1,300 pounds per square inch. Vincent spent 40 minutes photographing the family from the required 7-meter distance. Moses believed they were having an excellent trek, but Vincent was not satisfied. He wanted intimate close-ups that would show the gorilla's expressions in detail, images that would set his work apart from typical gorilla photography. Vincent announced his intention to move closer to the silverback for a portrait shot, a suggestion that Moses immediately and firmly rejected. Moses explained that approaching a silverback was extremely dangerous, that the animal would perceive it as a direct challenge to his authority, and that no photograph was worth the risk. Vincent argued that his experience with primates had taught him how to read their body language, and that the silverback was clearly relaxed. The argument escalated, with Vincent accusing Moses of being overcautious. Vincent finally declared that he was the client, that he had paid substantial fees for this trek, and that he would do as he pleased. Moses warned that if Vincent violated the distance protocols, he would immediately end the trek and report the incident to park authorities. Vincent ignored the warning and began moving slowly towards the silverback, his camera raised. He closed the distance from 7 meters to 5, then to 3. Moses called out urgent warnings, but Vincent waved him off dismissively. Vincent was now less than 2 meters from the massive silverback. The silverback had been watching Vincent's approach with increasing agitation. His body language shifted from relaxed to alert, then to aggressive. He began displaying warning behaviors, standing upright to his full height of nearly 6 feet, beating his chest with cupped hands that produced a loud drumming sound, and tearing up vegetation to throw. These were clear threat displays that any experienced guide would have recognized as a final warning before an attack. Vincent either didn't recognize the warnings or chose to ignore them. He continued photographing, moving even closer to capture the silverback's display. The massive gorilla's patience ended. He charged with shocking speed, covering the 2-meter distance in less than a second. The silverback's enormous hand grabbed Vincent's shoulder, his grip crushing bone instantly. The gorilla threw Vincent to the ground with enough force to knock the wind from his lungs. Vincent's camera flew from his hands and smashed against a tree trunk, the lens shattering on impact. The silverback bit down on Vincent's arm, his 2-inch canines penetrating deep into the flesh and crushing bone. He then grabbed Vincent's head in both hands and slammed it against the ground. The impact caused severe skull fractures and traumatic brain injury. Vincent's body went limp, blood pooling beneath his head. Moses and the other guides shouted and made themselves large, trying to distract the silverback. After approximately 20 seconds of sustained attack, the silverback released Vincent and returned to his family, gathering them and moving deeper into the forest. Moses immediately radioed for emergency medical evacuation, while his assistant guides attempted to stabilize Vincent. Vincent was unconscious but still breathing, though his respirations were shallow and irregular. The guides applied pressure to his head wound and tried to immobilize his neck. A medical helicopter was dispatched from Kampala. However, the dense forest canopy made landing at their current location impossible. The helicopter crew identified a small clearing approximately 1 kilometer away where they could safely land. Moses and his team fashioned a makeshift stretcher, then began the difficult trek through the steep, muddy terrain toward the landing zone. The journey took nearly 40 minutes. Vincent remained unconscious throughout, his breathing becoming increasingly labored. They reached the clearing just as the helicopter touched down. Medical personnel immediately took over, intubating Vincent and starting IV fluids. The helicopter rushed Vincent to the regional hospital. Doctors stabilized him enough for transfer to a better-equipped facility in Kampala, where neurosurgeons performed emergency surgery to relieve pressure on his brain and repair his fractured skull. However, the damage was extensive. Vincent remained in a coma for 3 days before developing a severe infection from his wounds. Despite aggressive antibiotic treatment, sepsis set in. Vincent died 6 days after the attack, never having regained consciousness. The investigation was straightforward, as Moses's account was supported by the other guides present. Vincent's damaged camera was recovered and contained partial footage showing his approach toward the silverback, though the recording ended abruptly when the camera was knocked away. Vincent had deliberately violated fundamental safety protocols despite explicit warnings, and his death was ruled as resulting entirely from his own reckless decisions. Vincent's death sent shockwaves through the wildlife photography and gorilla trekking communities, sparking debates about the ethics of risk-taking for dramatic images. His family in Poland was devastated. Bwindi Impenetrable National Park used the incident to reinforce safety protocols and to emphasize that no photograph justified risking human life or disturbing endangered wildlife. It was March 14th, 2013, and the land cruiser lurched through the shallow crossing of the Okavango Delta's Tamalakayan River. Elena Ruiz Calderon leaned halfway out the rear passenger window. Her camera trained on the riverbank where 3 massive crocodiles basked in the midday heat. Elena was a 29-year-old Spanish-language teacher from Spain who had saved for 2 years to afford this safari. Her colleagues described her as enthusiastic to the point of recklessness, the type who would climb fences at the zoo for better photographs. She had arrived in Botswana 5 days earlier, her first time in Africa, with 3 memory cards and a waterproof camera rated for extreme conditions. She had specifically requested a safari that included river crossings. Fascinated by the idea of driving through crocodile habitat, Elena's guide, a Botswanan man named Thabo Modis, had been leading safaris for 11 years without incident. He had explained during the morning briefing that all windows must remain closed during water crossings, a rule that existed for precisely the scenario about to unfold. Adult Nile crocodiles commonly reach double-digit lengths and can be massive. Exceptionally large males may exceed 13 to 16 feet and can weigh well over 1,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks from below or beside the water's surface, often targeting prey at the waterline. As the land cruiser entered the crossing, Thabo noticed Elena opening her window. He told her twice to close it immediately. She waved him off without looking away from her viewfinder, calling back that she was fine and knew what she was doing. 2 other tourists in the vehicle, a Dutch couple named Frans and Margot de Vries, later reported feeling uneasy about Elena's behavior, but said nothing. The crocodiles on the bank appeared motionless, their eyes tracking the vehicle's progress through the water. Elena extended her upper body further out the window, camera clutched in both hands, as she filmed the reptiles just a few feet away. Thabo judged that stopping mid-channel risked bogging the vehicle, so he urged her again, while keeping the land cruiser moving toward the far bank. The recovered footage shows clear footage of the basking crocodiles, then pans across the water's surface. Elena's breathing is audible on the recording, excited and rapid. Thabo's voice can be heard again, more urgent now, telling her to get inside. The vehicle was approximately 3/4 of the way across when the water beside the rear passenger door suddenly churned. The attack came from a direction Elena wasn't filming. A crocodile, submerged and invisible in the murky water, had detected the vibrations of the vehicle and the splashing near the open window. Witnesses saw the moment Elena jerks downward as something yanks her arm. She screams as she tries to pull back. The crocodile had latched onto her right forearm just below the elbow, its serrated teeth penetrating through skin, muscle, and tendons. Eyewitness accounts from people in the vehicle describe seeing Elena's body pulled violently against the window frame, her left hand grasping desperately at the door. The crocodile, estimated at 14 feet long, based on later examination of the footage, used its body weight and the mechanical advantage of the water to drag her downward and outward. Elena's entire upper body was wrenched through the window opening. Leaning well out of the window with her torso angled toward the bank made it possible for the croc to wrench her upper body through the opening. One of the passengers grabbed at Elena's legs, but the crocodile's grip was absolute. The crushing pressure of its jaws had already fractured both bones in Elena's forearm. She managed one more scream before her head disappeared below the water's surface. Elena's struggle became visible through the car window as she plunged beneath the murky water, dark swirls and froth marking each violent thrash. The crocodile's pale underbelly surfaced briefly as it executed a death roll, spinning her in the current with bone-crushing force. For a fleeting moment, Elena broke the surface again before the predator dragged her under, deeper this time, leaving only the rippling water behind. Thabo accelerated hard, the land cruiser surging up the far bank within seconds of the attack. Tourists were screaming incoherently, while someone shouted that they needed to go back. Thabo radioed for emergency assistance. The nearest ranger station was 18 miles away on rough roads. A response team arrived 31 minutes after the attack. Search efforts began immediately, but were hampered by poor visibility and the presence of multiple large crocodiles. Elena's camera was recovered 200 yards downstream the following morning, snagged on submerged vegetation. Investigators imaged the memory card and preserved the original files and timestamps as part of the chain of custody. The memory card remained functional, providing the only detailed record of the attack. No human remains were found during the 2-day search. The coroner's report, filed without a body, listed probable cause as drowning with massive traumatic injuries and estimated that survival after submersion was likely brief. The Safari Lodge implemented mandatory window locks on all vehicles and revised its liability waivers to include specific language about crocodile encounters. The footage was shared with the family, and public release was withheld. It was June 14, 2017, and the South African sun hung heavy over Kruger National Park, one of the largest and most dangerous game reserves on the African continent. Stretching across nearly 5 million acres of untamed bushveld, Kruger is home to lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and one animal that is one of the most dangerous large animals in Africa. The park is not a zoo. There are no cages, no glass barriers. The only thing separating tourists from animals weighing over 3,000 to 4,000 pounds is a set of rules and the common sense to follow them. The dry winter season had pulled water levels down across the low veld, concentrating wildlife around the remaining rivers and waterholes. Along the southern roads, herds of impala grazed in open grassland, while elephants moved between the mopane trees in slow, deliberate lines. And in the rivers, partly submerged beneath brown water, hippos gathered in pods of 10 and 20, their backs breaking the surface like dark, wet stones. The air carried the dry smell of dust and warm grass, and the stillness of the afternoon made the park feel calm, even peaceful, to visitors who did not understand how quickly that calm could turn. Macy Plink was 23 years old. She lived in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where she worked as a retail cashier. She had never been to Africa before. After finishing a seasonal job, she and 3 close friends pooled their money and booked a trip to South Africa. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. They spent the first few days in Johannesburg before renting a vehicle and heading east toward Kruger. None of them had formal wildlife training. But Kruger allows self-drive visitors, and the rules seemed simple. Stay in your vehicle. Do not approach the animals. At the gate, rangers handed them a printed map and a set of regulations. Visitors must remain inside vehicles on open roads. At designated lookout areas, they could exit, but were required to stay behind marked barriers. Under no circumstances were they to approach or provoke any animal. The group drove the southern loop, photographing zebras and giraffes. By mid-afternoon, they reached a river lookout with a gravel parking area and a wooden safety barrier overlooking the water. Several tourists were already standing behind the railing. A large warning sign was posted directly beside the barrier. It read, "Danger, do not leave viewing area. Hippos are extremely dangerous and unpredictable." Most people do not understand how dangerous a hippopotamus actually is. Despite their round, slow-moving appearance, hippos are among the most aggressive large animals in Africa. An adult male can weigh over 4,000 pounds. Their jaws open nearly 180 degrees and generate one of the strongest bite forces of any land animal. They run at speeds up to 19 miles per hour on land, faster than most humans can sprint. Hippos are fiercely territorial near water. They do not need to be provoked. Proximity alone is enough. Every year, hippos are responsible for hundreds of deaths across Africa, making them one of the most dangerous large animals on the continent. One large hippo had walked partly out of the river and stood on the muddy shoreline below the lookout. Its skin was dark and slick, still wet from the water. Its massive head hung low, and its barrel-shaped body barely moved in the afternoon heat. Tourists behind the barrier raised their phones. Macy stepped around the wooden barrier. Her friend stayed behind the railing. Macy walked across dry dirt beyond the viewing area, moving down the slope toward the riverbank. She was now standing on open ground between the hippo and the water. This was the most dangerous position a person could occupy. The animal was cut off from the river, its only escape route, and a human was directly in the way. The hippo lifted its head and turned toward her. Then it opened its mouth wide and released a deep, bellowing call. This was not a yawn. This was a direct threat display. When a hippo opens its jaws in the presence of an intruder, it is communicating one thing: leave now. Several nearby tourists behind the barrier began shouting, waving their arms, urging her to come back. Macy did not come back. She raised both arms and waved them at the animal. She shouted toward it. Then she clapped her hands together loudly, standing only several yards away from the largest and most aggressive herbivore in Africa. The hippo dropped its head and charged. It moved with terrifying speed, its short legs driving its massive frame across the mud in seconds. The ground trembled under its weight. Macy turned and ran toward the barrier, but the ground near the water was soft and slick, churned into wet mud by the river's edge. Her foot caught the mud wrong, and she pitched forward, slamming into the ground. She never got back up. The hippo reached her in seconds. It opened its jaws and bit down across her torso. The force was catastrophic. Hippo teeth are not shaped like a predator's fangs. Their tusks are thick, crushing weapons capable of breaking bone. The bite compressed her ribcage and threw her violently against the muddy bank. The animal lifted her partially off the ground before slamming her down again. It released her briefly. Then it bit again, clamping down on her midsection and dragging her several feet along the ground, leaving a wide streak of blood across the riverbank. She suffered catastrophic crushing injuries consistent with a large animal attack. Tourists screamed and fled from the viewing area. The noise caused the hippo to release her and lumber back into the river, disappearing beneath the brown water within seconds. The riverbank fell silent, except for the distant calls of birds and the faint ripple of water where the animal had submerged. Several visitors later said the silence afterward felt unreal, as if the park itself had gone still after the sudden violence. Emergency calls reached park rangers within minutes. A team arrived shortly after, but there was nothing to be done. Macy Plink had suffered severe traumatic injuries and was declared dead at the scene by responding paramedics, with park rangers securing the area until medical personnel completed the official assessment before advanced medical evacuation could be arranged. Authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident. Rangers confirmed all warning signage was in place and clearly visible. Witness videos later confirmed she crossed the barrier and approached the hippo on open ground. The investigation concluded the animal acted within its natural behavioral response. No action was taken against the hippo or the pod. Park officials issued a statement reinforcing that Kruger's safety regulations exist because the animals inside the park are wild and fully capable of killing a human being in seconds. Officials also reminded visitors that even designated viewing areas are only safe when the posted rules are followed at all times. The story spread across international media. Reactions were sharply divided. Some expressed sympathy for a young woman who made a single, irreversible mistake on a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Others pointed to the warnings, the barrier, and the shouts from bystanders as proof this was entirely preventable. Her friends returned to the United States and did not make public statements. Her family in Idaho requested privacy. Macy Plink died standing between a hippo and the only thing it wanted, the water.